G'day, mate. 40 here. The restream has been driving me crazy. It hasn't been connecting as it should. So this is my fifth go round trying to get this show started. And here's the theme. It comes from an Israeli right-wing historian, Gadi Taub, from his show that was placed on YouTube on October 6th.
Stake is Ilana Dayan speaking on CNN to Christian Amanpour, who asked her about the horrible death toll in Gaza, including, she said, 16,000 innocent children. And Ilana Dayan, and the thing about it, why I think the reason I chose it for the dumbest take is that Ilana Dayan is trying to explain why she is so under such a strong impression of October 7 that she primarily sees that. But she confesses Israel does not cover Gaza's suffering enough. And this is how our elites are the supplicants of progressive elites elsewhere. Because what any sane Israeli journalist, and there are very few of these, should have said is that, why are you asking me when these people are deliberately using their children as human shields, and then you want me to take responsibility for that? But no, Ilana Dayan, and this is, I wrote a whole book about that. These elites are looking up to elites. Their sense of solidarity and belonging is closer to elites in other countries than they are to their own people. And this becomes especially poignant since they think of themselves as provincials and they want to rise up to the tier of the metropolitan elites, where the real elites are, the real cultured people are, Christian Amanpour, the real people with a moral compass. So they end up kissing, groveling at the feet of anti-Semites and playing to CNN biases which are tinged with anti-Semitism. And this is a not just a dumb take on the news. This is infuriating that our journalists, and this Ilana Dayan is, I think you called her the Barbara Walters of Israeli TV. So she's like the dean of highbrow journalism, and she has all this. She has the fanciest Israeli accent with the knitted brows and the thoughtful look in her eyes and the rimless glasses. She's like the epitome of intelligence and conscience. And yet what she does in the end when faced with something like that is she grovels at the feet of a nasty CNN anchor. I rest my
I've never been able to. I need to get a knitted brow and some rimless glasses. I never mastered that look. The thoughtful, pensive.
First of all, your rimless glasses are CVS, and that does not.
Oh, don't tell.
That does not.
I got to change that.
That's not hospitable to knitted brows, Mike. You need more expensive glasses. Let's start there.
My wife keeps telling me that.
Well, she may be right. I don't want to get.
Okay, my sixth attempt to get this stream going today after quite a rough technical start. But here's my question. Is there a particular body language that is associated with different types of politics? Because just think about Tucker Carlson and Nigel Farage and Donald Trump. They have a different body language from members of the elite, right? It's more expressive, right? It is more varied. It's more dramatic. It's more emotional. And I'm wondering if different politics comes with a different way of expressing yourself. So let's look at these pictures of Ilana Dayan, incredibly poised, right? And so the elite attitude is that we should be reflexive, we should be strategic, that we should be poised, and that we can operate under a buffered identity where no matter what is going on around us, we can decide on our own what is right, what is wrong, what will give our life meaning and purpose, and that we can strategically choose the way forward for our life. Now, Tucker Carlson, the populist, right? He has these dramatic emotional appearances in his body language, in the alignment of his musculature, which are quite different, right? They're much more visceral from that shown by the elite news media. And same with Donald Trump and Nigel Farage. And this is Nigel Farage, again, someone who seems to be much more authentic and to be living a much more visceral experience than those of the highly disciplined BBC Newsnight moderators. And let's have a look at Donald Trump. So I'm wondering, are there changes in your physical manifestation when you get a different type of politics? Because liberalism depends upon this buffered identity. It depends upon rising above your particular environment and deciding right and wrong, meaning and purpose on your own. And so the conservative approach takes much more recognizing of the porous nature of our identity, how there are constantly forces that are flowing through us that can dramatically affect us. And so for a traditionalist, someone with more of a medieval mentality, right, they can go from giddy joy to despair to rage to resignation, or within the space of seconds. So question, are there certain physical manifestations of a particular politics, right? And can we nail them down? Is there a particular body language and type of tone used by the elite and then by the counter-elite? Right? I can't think of any elite commentator who makes Tucker Carlson's dramatic facial gestures. Right? Can we detect someone's worldview just by looking at them? Because people can usually tell who's on the right and who's on the left just by looking at body language. And so what about by listening to what people are saying, just listening to the tone, or just by watching them on TV with the sound down? And did Tucker Carlson's expressions of body language and appearance change as he became more populist? Because Tucker Carlson used to wear a bow tie, right? Here are some photos of Tucker when he co-hosted the Crossfire show. Right, this was quite a different Tucker Carlson in appearance than in his populist manifestation. So I think the clothing that you wear probably affects your body language and your voice quality. Right, you're going to feel more confident usually if you are dressed professionally in a professional setting than if you are underdressed for the setting that you're in. And I think of Tucker as a bow tie member of the establishment. He has dramatically changed from those days. And think about how conservatives reacted to the moderators in these recent political debates between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, J.D. Vance, and Tim Walz. So I studied for 3 years to become an Alexander technique teacher. And in my studies, I heard this intriguing idea that each emotion requires a particular alignment of our musculature. And that without that alignment, we can't fully access that emotion. To feel depressed, we have to depress and sag. To feel joy, we need more of an upward direction in our alignment. So each thought also requires an increased level of muscular tension. All right, you can't think through an idea without having increased levels of muscular tension than when you are not doing mental work. Instead, you're in a mode of just observing rather than judging. So I felt the difference right there. So when I was trying to make my point 20 seconds ago, I felt my shoulders start to rise up and there was increased tension. And now as I let go of that desire to develop a thought and to make a judgment, I noticed that my shoulders let go of that unnecessary muscular tension and body holding, and that my breath then becomes freer as there's less muscular tension and compression in my body. And so thinking about the gestures of populist politicians, all right, Viktor Orban, Nigel Farage, Donald Trump, right, are they more expressive than those of your normal politician? So I think that there's a genetic basis to politics, and that there are probably cognitive and physiological differences that predispose people to different types of politics. And similarly, a different type of politics probably predisposes a different cognitive and physiological pattern. So does embracing a particular politics develop a certain physiological reaction? So is there a correlation and a causation between one's politics and one's physiology. So conservatives, after the June 27, September 10, and October 1st debates, right, they were often angry at the moderators, who they described as smug, constipated, and stilted. And to whatever extent these are accurate reflections, right, these are reflections of a particular physiological state of the moderators. And I flirted with Marxism for 3 years, between 19 and 22. I just loved the shock and awe of telling people that I was an atheistic communist. And I'm trying to recapture now, did I have a different physiology? Did I experience different alignments of my musculature when I was flirting with a left-wing perspective on life? At other times, I've been much more right-wing and racist than I am now. And I think I had a different physiology in those more extreme states. So I think I can tell someone's politics often by their physiognomy, how they look, and also by their cognitive and physiological patterns. Right. One of my favorite YouTube channels over the past few months has been Meghan Kelly's, and she has show after show on why the CBS and ABC moderators were just terrible. So I'll play some excerpts from her.
Who was absolutely terrible last night. Not only, I'm sorry, she looked like she was stuck in 1992. And like just the whole look, the fashion, the makeup. Don't make that face at me, Mac Welsh. You know it's true. I'm just the only one with the guts to say it. And but she gets out there, and just as it starts to roll and they start to fight on immigration in a way that's really good, like JD is bringing up the specifics of what Biden Harris have done with this app that lets illegals come into the country, quote, legally, but it's all a sleight of hand. CBS actually cut his mic. It was egregious. Let me tell you something. As a moderator who has tried to herd these cats on the stage many times, I'm not opposed to cutting a mic if things have gotten totally out of hand.
Kip.
However, I do believe that
Kip, back onto the show. Kip, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, am I coming in loud and clear?
Yes, sir.
Well, first off, this Sunday to Sunday, man, I felt like I was out in the desert somewhere. When you sang that lullaby to me a few months ago, you said, winter, spring, summer, fall. Kip, all you've got to do is call. And then tell me the end of what you said. You said
I'll always be there for you.
That's right. That's right. You would always be there. You've got a friend. Then you got me out in the Sahara for a week. What's going on, man? What's going on?
Oh, man, I plan my shows around my life, not my life around my shows. So I also like to deliberately take a break, unless it's a pattern I have of making money or doing something that is just obviously righteous. I think it's good to take a break from doing regular shows so that you can reconsider what you're doing instead of just reacting by instinct. Oh, it's 5 o'clock weekdays here in Los Angeles. I need to do a show.
Right. I get my deep thoughts on Sunday, and I have a few current events for you first that I wanted to mention. But I remember after I had technical difficulties with you last Sunday, I was trying to figure out what happened. But I walked outside with my camera, same as I always do. And my head just felt like it was 150 degrees all of a sudden. And the laptop was hot to the touch. And I was experiencing like direct sunlight on that machine, and on me for that matter, that I hadn't felt. But the sun changes its track over your house different times of the year.
Yes.
And I had shade all those previous times talking with you. And all of a sudden I didn't have shade, and it felt like there was a laser on me. But that thing pretty much kind of made my machine go wonky until it came inside for a few minutes and cooled down. But so later on in the week, I was like doing I rewatched the show to see if I was even able to make some pertinent points. Because, sometimes you get flustered and You're like, where did I stop off? Where did I start back? And man, and I could just see, I felt like a et tu brute reading some of the comments in the comment section, not necessarily from you, In fact, I kind of felt like maybe you took up for me a little bit when Claire Khaw called in. Claire Khaw, the unique bird. Incidentally, how do you catch a unique bird, Luke Ford?
No idea.
Unique up on her. How do you catch a tame bird?
No idea.
Tame way. So and I don't know. I've noticed that she and that gazelle friend of yours, if they get on the line with somebody else, Luke Ford is dog meat, son. Of course, you know this though. You know this. You got a sixth sense about these things, don't you, Luke?
What do you mean? I'm dog meat. I'm the victim of their feminine. I'm the victim of their feminine wiles. Is that what you're saying?
No, you're dog meat in the fact that if they got an ideology or something that they want to come on to the Fortosphere and talk about, they get all warm and fuzzy with you. They start blowing, sunshine your way. And then they'll be on line 2 with Elliot Blatt, whatever, and they'll be trying to talk down to you, and it makes Elliot Blatt feel uncomfortable. You get what I'm saying? And it's trivial, superficial women crap, because they get on the phone. 70% of what they talk about is gossip. You know what I mean? 20% more is trying to relate a garbage experience to one another that ain't even worth talking about. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I sound a little bit wild when I say that. But I figure you already know all this stuff, though. And so whenever SJJ or whoever was telling you there's another side to this gazelle character, this curious gazelle,
yeah,
I believe that. I definitely believe that. But anyway, back to my main gripe last night, because I'd been a real good Buddha almost all week long. And then last night was like the 5th or 6th time I had seen this ad that came up on YouTube. And I hate to say it on Sunday, but I'll tell you the way it starts out. My husband's dick is 9.5 inches and he's 62 years old. And that's about the time where I hit the skip button, I hit the skip button. And I wonder, how can they get away with such indecency? This isn't YouPorn, it's YouTube. What do you know about these such things?
Well, the ads are algorithmically targeted to viewers, so there's something in your YouTube search history that makes them believe that you are predisposed to that kind of message.
Bullshit. I'll turn my device over to the legal department of YouTube and let them show me where they can find that. You get what I'm saying? I'll tell you that is not true. I know from anecdotally of just my own case, but it made me think, well, indecency. You see the creep. I see it with when I'm trying to scroll YouTube videos, all the shorts and videos, what they call shorts now. It's just boobs and butts hanging out of clothes, and I guess because that's what's getting the most clicks or whatever. So I don't like the way that the degradation of women like that. And I'm like, well, what do you do? What do you do when you're trying? In my case, I was trying to watch the reaction of the NASCAR driver who had the race stolen from him basically by NASCAR officials. I thought, well, that's going to be an interesting reaction. But guess what loads up, before that? Some woman wanting to talk about her husband's 9.5-inch dick. I don't like it. So one thing I was going to ask you is, am I being a prude if I walk into somebody's office on Monday or Tuesday and ask them, hey, who do I contact to sue these guys? Are they going to tell me I'm just being a prude? Are we allowed to draw the line? Or are they just allowed to just like keep on corrupting us? You tell me what's the happy medium here we're going for, Luke?
I do think there's a problem there. If you're being assaulted by advertisements where a woman's talking about her husband's 9.5-inch penis and you're just trying to watch a regular YouTube video, that's an assault. I mean, many men, including myself, need to make rigorous efforts to desexualize our lives, because I know for me, I can easily spend hours a day in a state of lust. And so the easiest way for me to desexualize my life is to try to remove all that unnecessary sexual conversation. And so I do feel those advertisements as an assault, and I do think there's a problem there. They shouldn't be bombarding people with that kind of language on YouTube.
Right. Well, just like me personally, I ran into like debit card fraud like twice in the last 18 months. And I just feel like this creep of just society turning into a total shit heap. And it's like, where do I draw the line? And let me tell you, there's been times in the past where I see corporations crossing the line and I don't do anything. I'll give you an example. Bank of America was sitting around. I watched the way they did their debit card services. You might, Luke Ford might go out and use his debit card 5 or 6 times in the day. And the bank at the end of the night, at midnight, when they're doing their accounting, they're going to take your largest purchase of the day and run it through first, and then run it largest to smallest all the way through. And you'll tell me, Kip, what does it matter? It's their prerogative. And I sat around and wondered that too myself for like several months, because I was losing sleep over it, because that was not the way I was presenting my card during the day. And I would say, well, why wouldn't they just run the debits through the way the card was presented in that order? That's not true. They want to maximize the NSF fees or whatever bank fees they can charge you by taking the biggest amounts out first. And then the smallest amounts, you might, those last 3 or 4 debits might only be $2 or $3 a piece. But if you were $20 overdrawn, you're going to be NSF, $100 worth of bank fees or whatever it is. I don't know what the bank fees are. So anyway, the last time I lost sleep over something like that was Bank of America. And then had to sit there and read an article 2 years later about somebody that sued the piss out of them and won bunches of money over the same thing, and made them change their policy. So you see, that's why I'm calling you, wondering, is this another one of those situations where I should be offended, but am I being a prude, or should I really be offended? So you're saying maybe there is something there, huh?
Yeah, I think there is something there. Not everyone is equally suited for turning this into a crusade. So for some people, turning this into a crusade will work to their advantage, and for other people, it will work to their disadvantage.
As far as back to the crew, I was trying to think particularly what was said in the comments section that was dogging me out, but I believe Kim a Dog reminded me of that. If you've ever seen a pack of dogs where there's that one dog that's usually not even the biggest, but it's the one that bites a person or a dog in the behind and then runs and hides behind the pack as everybody else, starts to get involved, because I saw that the negative comments. He said, let me go into YouTube. You've ever seen a pack of dogs? Make kind of a little encyclopedia of all the things that we were able to call out on Kip. And I was like, ha, 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 ha. But because I don't have a big ego, it didn't make me mad. It just made me say, aha, that's the way life is. But one of the gripes in the comments section from our discussion last Sunday had been something along the lines of, Kip is 100%, claims to be 100% spiritual and 0% in the now, secular, whatever you want to call that other thing. And if it makes Khaw feel better, then call it 99-1, 99 over 1, whatever you want to call it. But your mind has an algorithm, just like your YouTube has an algorithm. And every once in a while, Luke may notice on Twitter, YouTube, wherever, you might hit a sweet spot on the algorithm, and you're like, man, this thing is an extension of my own doggone brain. I love it. And then all of a sudden, somebody will send you a video, and you'll delve down some rabbit hole. You'll veer towards the wrong direction, and the algorithm's all fucked up, And I'm not even talking about necessarily smutty. I'm just talking about your brain works like that. You know what I'm saying? Instead of being able to recall the high-minded thoughts you would like to discuss with somebody, next thing you know, you're remembering something stupid and trivial, So that's why I say that 50-50 crap, you better watch out, even 90-10 or whatever. And I think it was Cal, or maybe if you got a fan named Brandon, maybe it was somebody named Brandon that basically, he didn't say this exactly, but he was saying something to the effect of, Kip has his doggone fortress of solitude, and he sits up there and he loses touch with reality. And it's like, the irony. He's claiming me to be stuck in Plato's cave. You get what I'm saying? He's claiming me. He wants the shadows and the echoes to be real. And all Kip said, in a nutshell, was there might be something more. I didn't tell him to go cut his hair off and join an ashram, did I, Luke? Did I tell him to do that? Did I tell him to do anything crazy? Did I say anything that was off the rails last week?
I don't recall exactly, but we all tend to think that other people should be more like us. And so, whatever we're embodying, we're presenting some sort of challenge to the way that other people are leading their life. If we stand up for anything, we start instinctively challenging other people.
Right. As if I'm not a fisher of men with a net sitting there on the side of the pond trying to scoop up every ounce of reality I find, And on one level, maybe it's because I left the world or whatever, and I might say, God, one of the best rappers ever was a guy named Prince B, PM Dawn, and I'll answer, he said, I left reality early due to the lack of love and reason. And there's a whole lot to that statement. He sang a whole song, in my opinion, that was just being sung to deity one time. And he started out the song, something to the effect of, whatever I do, I'm always thinking of you. I have a love for you that nothing hides. And then when he gets into the verse, he says, I've become amused. I've become blind. I've become what I know not see, what breathes. You seem illiterate to all my emotion. I stand corrected, how well you read. And I mean, the whole song is just something that a normal person, they can't pull that off. Not only can he rap, it's beautiful verse that he's done tapped into the new sphere somewhere and snatched from beyond. But another part of the song, he says things like, it's in the windows, the doors, the passageways to the truth. I caress the infinite light that even at night overshadows the moon. I mean, real mystical stuff. But anyway, I kind of veered off to the side. But what say you on that balance? Because balance, both these guys think there's no balance there with Kip. And I'm saying, watch out. You'll be tossed in the cesspool of life if you pull off too much balance. Give me the retort. Speak for them.
So one way of analyzing this is, would more people be better off living like you? And so one way of approaching this is, would more people be better off being high much of the time? And I would say no, that would not work towards most people's benefit. Usually when people are happy and thriving and they're connected to other people, they are much less inclined to mysticism. On the other hand, people who are struggling in life, they tend towards much more of an inclination towards mysticism. Mysticism usually lifts people out of lives that aren't working. It's relatively rare that people go from a thriving life into a devotion to mysticism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to touch on that. I want to veer off, and then we'll come away to what you're talking about. I want to talk about hang-ups, and one might be you and my weed. That's my religious sacrament. That brings me closer to God. I'm able to feel the transcendent from that. And maybe you and your ADHD medication is different. Maybe you say, that brings me normalcy or whatever. But in the case of mine, and in that same regard, I would not hold it against you if you were able to pull the bark off a certain tree there in California and pull a certain root out of the ground there in California and put it in a cauldron and create the same effect for yourself that makes you feel well, and keep the pharmacist and the the prescribing doctors and the people who made up the compounds out of the whole thing, because I'm saying if that brings Luke closer to God and it ain't putting me in harm's way, well, that's his religious sacrament. You know, he's naming it something else. But if that's the only way Luke feels holy, well, by God, it's your religious sacrament. And to the second effect, another thing that I'm not saying you have a hang up. I'm just saying, just in case you have a hang up about, let's say, me and my insurance, because besides weed, that's the other thing you like to come back to. A woman, if we were married, I might accuse you of harping. But one aspect of me that, because you're Australian, you might not know, I was a Marine. So, of course, I can go to any VA hospital anywhere, and they're just going to treat me, you know. So me going to the clinic or me going to the county health department or the walk-in clinics, that's just easier maybe than going through the red tape of a VA hospital or whatever. So I sort of earned that. But I think people that have worked for the government or whatever do get special privileges. So you never hear me tooting that horn. What do you say about that? Just that maybe.
Right. So there are things that you're. Let me answer. So there are things that you're. Let me answer. Okay. So there are things that you are doing that may be working for you. I don't believe they are. I don't believe that it works for you to smoke marijuana. I don't believe that it works for you to not be devoted to a job, but I understand that you feel like these two things do work for you, and I want to be open-minded to the fact that they may work for you, but I would strongly wager that they would not work well for the average person. And so there are things that work for an individual that you would not want widely copied in society.
Right. Yeah, I'll be the first to say you're right there. You're right. In fact, even our line of discussion to all you Brandons and Kimadov and Cows out there, if you're not 40 years old and you've hit that a certain milepost in life, forget what we're even talking about. You get what I'm saying, Luke?
Yeah.
They're not ready for that. So I'm trying to close a chapter on the comment section and actually get to the meat of what I want to talk to today. But trying to think if they had any. They accused me of not addressing things, you know, so I'm trying to address, you know, and on that, did I sort of address the Fortress of Solitude part? Okay.
Yeah. So you talk about being holy. What does that mean? So in Judaism, for example, it has a very concrete definition. It's a matter of separation. So recognizing the separation from the Sabbath and the other days of the week, recognizing the separation from the mundane and the set aside, sanctified holy days, recognizing a difference between kosher and non-kosher, between Jews and non-Jews, between male and female, between adults and children. So it's recognition of these important distinctions that constitutes being holy. For you, being holy means what?
Let me answer it this way. When was the last time Luke felt transcendence and metaphorically left this mortal coil, you know, kind of the soul soar with the gods and stars and the eagles? Like, even if you're not interested in the glory of the inner light, the value of transcendence shouldn't be undersold. Like when I'm hearing Bruce Hornsby, his fingertips are tickling those ivories on certain songs, I can be transcended. I can be like moved to tears. I can see, like William Blake, see the universe in a grain of sand. The same effect would come. Maybe I couldn't do it 3 times in a row, listening to, say, a Dolly Parton song like Coat of Many Colors, but it would happen the first time. So when I say sacrament, I'm talking about that's the way I get closer to God. And to look at it in the negative, when I took 10, 11 months off, I was trying to see if I could do the Luke way. And I told you that it's a pill with a V, not called Viagra, but I tried something for a sleep aid called Valium. And no, I felt further from God that whole 10 or 11 months that I tried to use Valium as a placebo and try the straight way, which for me further convinced me that That's just, we're programmed to believe certain things, Luke. So I basically experimented the other way. You get what I'm saying with that volume?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, that whatever feels good to you, you're going to mount an elaborate intellectual defense of it. And probably the same for me. This is how we operate. We're not operated primarily by reason, but we experience good feelings and emotions, and then we mount elaborate intellectual defenses for those. But for you, feeling close to God, is there anything objective to that experience? For example, are there behaviors that you wish you could indulge in, but by feeling close to God, you can no longer indulge in?
I'm not compelled. Mine is more permanent. And this is the thing, I don't know, Luke, back, the thing that was significant about there was a time around Buddha and Jesus, and a lot of these religious people all came at the same time. And that's because before then, people like to sacrifice animals. Hell, they like to sacrifice people too, Luke, but what they say about Moses, the rest of them wanted a calf or something to worship, something to sacrifice. He was the only one that could go up the mountain where the rest could not follow. So I guess my point is, the point of the Buddha, the point of Jesus, the mystical interpretation, the real meaning behind all that stuff that's been co-opted by organized religion, is these guys were saying, you're missing the point. You don't have to sacrifice anything. You're sacrificing yourself, and you're doing it and when you do, it's actually better. The first little things that I noticed was all those logos and signs going down the highway. They had no pull over me anymore. All the little things that I never even realized was magic before had no pull on me whatsoever. So there's really a lot going on.
So you get to do exactly what you want, and you're not sacrificing anything, and you get to experience the divine in a holy life. It sounds wonderful. You pay no price, and you get to do what you want.
Yes, that's what holy means, whole. That's exactly what.
No one says holy means whole. That's something that Kip comes up with.
Okay, I'm like telling you where it came from. So
no, it doesn't come from whole, WHOLE.
Okay, we don't have to argue that point. Well, I tell you what. I had a small thing, but I was gonna make a series of points and maybe let you argue in the firm or the negative on a few of them. Is that okay?
Sure, great.
Son? Okay.
Yep.
So now you can tell I was speaking from the hip. So now you might tell I'm not gonna have the same passion. Okay, but it's just because we could be more complete this way. I felt it's best to start one way and finish the other. The word religion, Luke, comes from the word Latin religio, to tie, to bond, to link back. Religions are more about maintaining culture, not cultivating man's inner light. Most religions had twofold, sometimes threefold doctrines, and that would be God is it, would be doctrine number one. You are it, which is the true doctrine. But over time, they realized the commoner couldn't handle it. They would pervert it. Without getting their inner light, they would go start trying to put hexes on neighbors. That's all I'm saying. So to go back, the two and threefold doctrines, God is it, you are it. And that third doctrine that's less common would be like North Korea. The dear leader is it. You get what I'm saying, Luke? The esoteric occult understanding, truly the good news is that the truth that's incompatible with modern consumerism, and even and every time the true religion of man's inner light has been made known, man's tendency is to pervert this knowledge and use it against his fellow man. For many reasons, this knowledge is kept hidden, only known amongst the Kabbalists, Platonists, Freemasons, Sufi mystics, Buddhist sects, Hermeticists, magical cults, and the like. To give you an idea, like Kabbalism, that came together like down in Alexandria, and that's basically a merging of like three ways of thought. That would be like esoteric Greek philosophy in a Platonic sense, that sort of sense, merged with Egyptian wisdom religion and Jewish mysticism. Now I know something went on in Babylon where Jews changed up their religion and basically watered it down. And then they came and watered it down. Now, I don't even know if they, I don't even know what's left of it. The way you talk, most Jews are atheists. But things have just changed over time. So I don't know if I'm basically asking you a question there, but that was just kind of background information. Did you have anything you wanted to add before I made the next point?
Yeah. So the experience, the state that you are advocating, this mystical state, is a very individualized one, while religions tend to be communal. And so overwhelmingly, people will be far happier and more effective in life if they are immersed in a group. But there's probably a tiny number of people who are going to be happier and better off going on their own. So overwhelmingly, I think people would be worse off following the experience that you are recommending, and that most people are going to be better off living connected lives with other people, of which religion is just one expression of a connected life.
Right. Well, the religion, like of the culture around me, says that it was okay for, how do I explain that? With Jesus, they took up stones against him, and he was like, why do you take up stones against me? For I say that I am a God, and they say, let's see, I'm missing my point here. They basically take up stones against him, and they say, we're not taking stones against you for that. We're taking up stones against you because you're blaspheming. And he says, well, does it not say that I and the Father are one? And the way that Christianity wants to say it is that's okay for Jesus, the boss's son, but you can't see him as going through an analogy to your experience. They've cut that off. They want you to come through the church, pay your money or whatever. It's different. The Western Empire cleaved apart, and you had the Eastern Orthodox Church. They have something called theosis that knows exactly what happened to me back in 2007, but they're different in the fact that they say it's got to happen while you're in the church. That you got to be enchanted by the church and have the bells and the smells and the music and all that kind of stuff. So they would say that whatever I got was illegitimate. It had to be done. It needed to be done through the church. But that's called theosis in the Eastern Orthodox Church. It's only in the Western side that they frown upon thinking like me. But anyway.
Okay, let me jump in. Yeah, let me make a point. So anyone walking around saying that he's God or part of the Godhead would get stoned by Jews. Jews have a horrified reaction, an amused reaction, a disgusted reaction to any dude who says that he's God. And so I can understand any Jewish reaction where people will violently react or strongly react against anyone who claims to be God. And I would strongly react against anyone who claims to be God. I would think that they'd lost their mind. Now, as far as the religion of the individual versus the religion of the group, Protestantism is the most individualist of the world's religions, far more than the Eastern religions. Protestantism is all about your individual walk with Jesus. And as a result, Protestant nations are the quickest to secularize because Judaism and Roman Catholicism are much more embodied religion that's practiced within a group where there are rituals and there are special meals, special ways to dress and to conduct yourself. Under the secular assault, Roman Catholicism and perhaps even Judaism stand up much better. The world's first secular countries are the Protestant countries, such as Northern Europe. So the essence of Protestantism is individual salvation to the next world. And so I would contend with you that Protestantism is far more of an individualist religion than any other religion of which I'm aware. Pass.
Okay. I want to make two more quick points. A mystic like me is just someone who's experienced union with God, divinity, the cosmos, This experience is undeniable, and the subsequent union is permanent. It's not something that you need any refresher course or whatever. It's true that I kind of like get caught up in the world, but I never forget who I am. I never like certain things. I never fall back into. But some things, it's on me. You know, it's on me to like keep my mind in the right place at all time. But examples of mystics be like Giordano Bruno, Jacob Beamy, Emanuel Swedenborg, and like in the modern idiom, maybe like Julius Evola, he was a mystic. Steve Bannon, when he was in the Navy, he knew where all the bookstores were and all the port of calls to get all his mystical books and that kind of stuff. So I don't know if he's had the mystical experience, but I think he's on board and kind of understands there's a lot more of the world going on than people realize. And another point I wanted to make is the age of revelation is not now. All the great teachers came from simpler times, living and studying uncluttered in the natural world some 2 millennia ago. Akhenaten, the Buddha, Moses, Pythagoras, Zoroaster, Krishna, Hermes, and many others. They studied all aspects of the visible world in hopes of understanding the invisible world. They saw reality as the final proof of the truth of a fact. So that was just some background. Nowadays, the individual seeks something better without becoming better. Israel, too, they seek a more harmonious relationship with their neighbors, but this won't happen until leaders in Israel become better. That is to say, it's not enough to associate with religious people. They must be led by their inner light, not simply by the normal means of mind, body, and emotions. The human being is best governed when the best part of himself leads himself, which is the part dwelling within the body, within the emotions, behind the mind, how to reach it, how to challenge it to emerge from the benefit of each person, bring it forward, how to reach the opening of the inner light so that something superior to mind can become the ruler of mind and use the mind, body, and emotions as an instrument for a sacred purpose. Various doctrines and teachings were developed to bring forth an individual's higher nature. The Neoplatonists, Buddhists, Hermetics, and many others worked on this problem. The light in the inner must shine on the inner. The individual was not holding up a candle. It's something else. The light comes from above. The mystic who has found this light are unable to show others a specific way to find the light, only to explain how they themselves were able to develop. What do you say about that mouthful I've just given you?
Well, it exists in a world that isn't falsifiable. And so I'm sure this is a superior strategy for some people. I think some people are naturally equipped for an individualist mystical life, and many people are not. What I'm curious about is, in practical terms, how have you become a superior human being through embracing this mystical journey?
I mean, I'm not superior, man. That's why you'll never hear me use the word like enlightened. Somebody sounds like a prick that uses that word. You get what I'm saying?
No, superior to what you were before, not superior vis-a-vis other people, but superior to who you were prior to this experience.
Oh, I mean, I have unity with the universe now. I have that connection, man. I can feel that transcendence. Nobody can pull the okie doke with me on lots of things like desires and things like that. I can see right through them. I'm telling you, it's just something you'll have to experience for yourself. You know, if you do, I'm just telling you that it seems like there's 1,000 different religions. There's no 1,000 different religions. There's only this one religion. And then there's, like I tell you, it's twofold. There's this other thing, this cultural thing that you're talking about. And that thing has probably served the Jews well or whatever, but it doesn't turn out many holy people. You know, if you think about it, if you judge something by the fruits of their labor, or by the fruit that it bears. But I wanted to make up a little I know it's Sunday and I shouldn't come at you, but earlier this week, actually day before yesterday, I was feeling I felt like the dark spirit come across me, and I had some bad thoughts about Israel. And I said, hey, I should collect these up. I'm sure Luke would give me a damn mouthful over these. So can I spill them out to you? Okay, sure. This is what you live for. Is Israel a parasitic, psychopathic nation? Israel lives in Section 8 housing in Palestine and survives on welfare checks and military aid from America. They've been a blight on the neighborhood since day one and have done little to ingratiate themselves to the neighbors in the region. Israel epitomizes the loser, the scumbag who claims all of his ex-girlfriends, all of his neighbors are shitheads, not him. They claim it's a bad neighborhood with bad neighbors. But you're the dumbass newcomer who chose to live in the neighborhood. They didn't change the neighborhood out when you showed up. The neighbors were already there. Israel was offered Section 8 housing elsewhere too. Then, to add insult to injury, those scumbags chose to practice apartheid and treat Palestinians as the other. Here's a novel idea. Zionists should build friendships in the neighborhood the way they did with the Nazis back in the 30s. It's an American, as an American, Israel is a friggin' liability. They expect the neighborhood to improve, but refuse to improve their thinking. No amount of bloodshed will ever satiate this synagogue of insanity and unholy hate. Now give it back to me. Come on, fire back, Luke.
Okay, so I'm just curious, which nations treat non-citizens the same way that they treat their own citizens?
America treats a lot of our non-citizens better than citizens, but those Palestinians were there first. So you can't pull that apartheid shit like they did in South Africa and have, separate. Only these people can own land. Only these people can do this. Only these people. You can't do that. That shit wouldn't fly here. So you're telling me everything they do, you could fly here? Here, the land where the Jews set up the NAACP, wouldn't fly here, shouldn't fly there. You're rhetorical.
So, in other words, you're saying that, yes, it's correct, that no nation treats non-citizens the same way as it treats citizens. And so Israel is just like every other nation on earth. It does not treat non-citizens the same way it treats citizens.
Okay. I mean,
so the Palestinians who live in Gaza and the West Bank are not citizens of Israel. So why on earth would you expect them to be accorded the same rights as citizens?
I don't know. I know when that place kicked off in 1948, there was Palestinians there. They were expected to have rights. They're not expected to be...
Rights by whom? Who gives them rights? Rights only come from the nation state, and there was never a Palestinian nation state. So where did their rights come from?
Well, where did their rights go then? I mean, where did they go?
Never have any. If you don't have a nation state, you don't have any rights. If you don't have a nation state, you don't have any rights.
Well,
because no one can enforce.
You need to go back to the Balfour Declaration. That was in the fine print, which you can't.
So if there's a piece of paper written by some English lord in 1917 that automatically confers rights on stateless peoples, but the world doesn't work that way. Stateless peoples effectively have no rights, and that's the way it's always been throughout history.
Anytime we want to justify what they did to even deserve that place, to run the people off out of Palestine, they did nothing. And in fact, why is it insult to injury? The Arabs in the region sit around and listen to T.E. Lawrence's bullshit and fought with those people in World War I. And what was their thank you? The Jews, who didn't do that, they didn't fight in that region in World War I. Come on there and pull some Section 8 housing bullcrap. So I don't know. I mean, at first I was going to ask you to do the long, bloody walk down all the most close dozen neighbors around them and rate the relationship of Israel, and its neighbor from 1 to 10. But you and I know what the answer to that is. You may surprise me in telling me a couple of them, 2 out of their closest dozen neighbors, maybe they get along with. Maybe they get along with Armenia. Maybe they get along with Qatar. Maybe they get along with Iraq, and I don't know about it, But You, Luke Ford, would not go move to the hood. If it was a dangerous place to live, you wouldn't go move there. You know, the place was apparently all right before. So you and I have had this discussion a little bit where, especially if you're the 110, 115 IQ crowd, you got to level up your thinking, because you're basically saying the other team is incapable of leveling up their thinking, but they can tell they're being treated like the other instead of getting equal treatment. So I don't know.
Okay, so we already recognize that no state treats non-citizens the same way it treats citizens. So
you're calling Palestinians non-citizens, and
I'm not calling them. They are not citizens. Residents of Gaza are not citizens of the state of Israel. That's an objective fact.
Okay.
I mean, no matter how much marijuana you smoke, they're still not going to be citizens of the state of Israel.
Well, it's the set of rules you want to believe. I mean,
okay, where is it not true? Where on earth do states treat non-citizens with all the same rights they accord their citizens?
Well, now you're trying to pencil whip me with the term non-citizens.
They're not citizens. That's an objective fact.
I'm sure the people down in South Africa did the same thing before they were sent out of town. You know, I'm sure that went along there. So I don't know. I would just say, like, for example, when it comes to Israel, how does Bibi Netanyahu defend himself and Israel's actions in the ICJ? How's that been going for him?
I don't know. Why does it matter that much? Why should Israel and its supporters be terribly concerned about the ICJ, which has very little power?
Should we not have justice? Should there be no justice in the region?
Oh, so the ICJ decides justice. On what basis does the ICJ decide justice?
No, I'm saying if not them, then who?
The strong. I mean, they don't pay attention. Take what they want.
They blow you. Israel blows off UN Security Council resolutions. They blow off the ICJ. So you tell me, who do they listen to? Is it just the person sending them their checks, or they don't listen to them either? Is it just the person granting them a Section 8 housing, or do they not listen to them either? I mean, you tell me, if we were going to be a neighbor and we had a problem, who the hell am I supposed to go to? The UN Security Council, the ICJ? They gaff them all off, don't they, Luke? They gaff them all off, don't they, Luke?
Just like every other nation in the world, Israel pursues its own national interests. And if that means ignoring or superseding resolutions by the United Nations or the International Criminal Court, then that's what Israel does. Just the same with the United States. The United States does not change its policy according to rulings of the United Nations in the International Criminal Court. So most nations prefer to follow their self-interest. Those nations that don't follow their self-interest don't last long in history.
Right. I'm your friend, and I don't even like talking about this subject. That's why you can see I usually sidestep it, because
it's fine with me.
I know it's fine with you, but it makes me feel unholy sometimes, you know. So I want to make a couple other points that weren't Israel related, but you can fire away at me. But I wanted to say, you can be that guy that buys the extra life insurance, buys the umbrella policies, purchases the extended warranties. You can try to insulate yourself from life's pains, but most times you'll find that insurance plans have exclusions and riders, warranties have loopholes, cancers emerge, and realizing the true gaps in your insurance coverage may actually add insult to injury. Rich people hate the fact that money can't insulate them from life's pains. They want to live in a world where servants don't drop the china and the silverware never has spots, but life isn't like that. You want to make a point to that before I make?
Yeah. There's no magic key to insulating yourself from life's pains. Mysticism won't do it. Religion won't necessarily do it. And there's no one approach to life. There's no universal way of living, such as buying maximum insurance, that's going to insulate you from life's pains. But more than anything else, probably accumulating financial resources and human connections is the best way to minimize the pains of life and to optimize your chances for a good life.
Right. So you get my point that even if you have a good career, watch out trying to bubble wrap your whole life, because you'll end up being broke. And then you'll feel like you'll get madder than a mashed cat when one of those car warranty policies, they start showing you the fine points in the exclusion. It's going to make you mad because you thought you had bubble wrapped and covered everything, you know. So I just say that. I say that because I remember the first year I made like $100,000. I think it was like 1994. And I remembered at the end of it, maybe I had like $2,500 left. But I just remember how hollow it was that I had conned myself into believing that I was working so hard day to day that I was giving myself those moment to moment gratifications of eating it out back or Red Lobster and all these things 4 and 5 times a week. But what happened, Luke, is those meals, even in and of themselves, started feeling mundane. You get what I'm saying? They were no better than a meat and 3 from the local diner. They just cost 3 or 4 times as much. So a lot of that stuff is so hollow. And I know I don't want to come at you and say that I know you don't have to make money. I'm just saying, gosh, when I say people don't have a lot of free will, a lot of times, I'm saying they're spending it 4 times in their head as fast as they're making it. So how much free will can they have if they're trying to buy all the insurance and buy all that stuff? Because we know you can't live in a world where the servants don't break the fine china. That's the point. So you agree with that, but you just kind of went back in the other direction too. I also was going to say,
wait. Let me address that point. Just because various strategies for life are not 100% effective does not mean that they're not useful. And so for most people, they are better off with auto insurance if they drive a car in the United States. Most people are better off possessing health insurance. People who own a home will usually find it a necessity to purchase some type of home insurance. Now, there are going to be better and worse forms of auto insurance, health insurance, and home insurance. And there's not a simple magic key that guarantees which type of policy is going to be better off. But I will tell you that those who spend a little time and do a little research trying to find the best policy will usually be better off in life and more effective. That generally speaking, the trait of conscientiousness results in a happier, safer, more effective life. And people in general would be better off exercising more conscientiousness than they currently do, even though there is nothing that guarantees a 100% successful life. So in the field of dating, most of the things that you can do to make yourself more attractive to the opposite sex are in your best interests, right? You can take care of your physical appearance. You can get into shape. You can get into physical shape. You can get into spiritual shape. You can get into social shape. You can get into good psychological shape. You can get into good financial shape. All those things will improve your dating prospects, but they will also simultaneously improve the quality of your life. But there's no one thing that you can do that will guarantee yourself a 100% successful, pain-free life.
Yes. And in fact, to prove the first point that you just made was if people are spending less time with trivia and paying like more attention to their, let's say, homeowners policy, this house that I'm talking to you from now, a straight up policy. You just call them, ask for a year's worth of coverage. They'll give you a number. You set up the policy. That number was like $1,300 a year. But if you call them and get what they might call a premium policy, you can get a policy for only $100 more a year. So instead of $1,300, it's $1,400. But what do you get for that? You get, like, if your house burns down, you get $50,000 worth of rent. If you need that, you get $25,000 worth of flood protection if your pipes burst. You get 125% of dwelling coverage just in case it costs more to rebuild than what your house was actually worth when it burned down. You get a whole lot more coverage, but you had to ask. You know what I mean? Because they're not going to give it away. They're not going to give away the real protection. They're going to send you out the door with the baseline protection unless you ask around. And then there's another level where you actually have what's called umbrella policies. And that's where I believe people might be getting overkill because they want the ultimate. They want to make sure there's $1 million coverage if the man falls off their roof. And with the policy that I just spoke with you, it's only 100,000. You know, it's going to keep the wolves away in ways that a regular home insurance policy aren't going to do it. But it's not an umbrella policy, because that umbrella policy might be $3,000 or $4,000 a year. So anyway, that stuff is the devil's into the details on things.
Let me follow up on this. Are there things that women can do to reduce their chances of being raped? Yes. Right. You can be more discriminating in who you go out with. You can be more discriminating in who you invite back to your home alone. You can be more discriminating to whom you go back to someone else's place alone. You can behave and dress in a certain way that's going to significantly reduce your chances of getting raped. But there's no one thing that you can do that 100% guarantees you won't be raped. But there are all sorts of commonsensical traditional things that you can do that significantly reduce your chances of getting raped. And the same is true for guys in the sense of getting raped by life, right? There are things that you can do that significantly reduce your chances of getting raped by life. Maintaining good relations with your family, with your friends, with your community, and accumulating a financial reserve and staying on top of your job skills, right, will significantly reduce your chances of getting raped. I sometimes encounter people who are suddenly in desperate straits. They desperately need money. They have no place to sleep. They desperately need medical care, and they don't have health insurance. And so there are wise things that you can do to reduce your chances of being in such desperate states, because you really don't want to be in a desperate state if there's anything you can do to avoid it, because the more desperate the state that you're in, the less clear your thinking will be. Pass.
Right. And I was going to say, you were talking about, like, you were actually, when you're talking about women and being raped, you're talking about human nature is what you're talking about. And in many cases, magic is merely the manipulation or just the knowing of human nature and taking advantage of that. Is it magic when the wine lobby is able to con a generation of baby boomers to drink wine by tricking them into believing it's guilt-free and healthy? Is it magic when your server touches your arm and calls you by name when she's handing over your check? She doesn't know she's using magic. She just knows tips are 21% higher when she does those two things. And also, Luke, not to get too out there with you, but matter also plays tricks on you. An example of that would be the sound of your keys maybe triggering you to want to pee, you know, when you come home or whatever. So that stuff, there's a fine line. You know, magic ain't so mystical and smoky as people think.
Okay, I got a thought. So people feel a lack of the magical and the mystical in the world. People usually want to live in a more enchanted world. And as religion has declined in importance, as people find their needs for comfort getting met outside of religion, people find themselves living in an increasingly mundane world. And so there is a human yearning for a more enchanted world, which I recognize and respect.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say, you can't storm the gates of heaven. One must be still, humble, and righteous. The still voice, the small voice, comes only to those who stop talking long enough to hear it. And it's very rare, even among most of the devout religious people. The mysterious realm of intuition must be entered into, because the intellect alone will not suffice. And you see this, like when a chemist makes a breakthrough that gets him the Nobel Prize or whatever. He's rationally thinking about chemistry all day, and then at night he slips asleep, and in his subconscious mind something clicks, and he wakes up and he goes to his notes. You know what I mean? And he just, in many cases, they don't know what it is. Inspiration or whatever. They'll chalk it up to a lot of things, but you see what was going on. They didn't have anything but that problem stirring around in their head. They didn't think about the Cowboys or the porn that was on this week or whatever. It was just that one thing. And then magically, if they're lucky, it's as if a God or something gives them the little key. You get what I'm saying? The key. So now you're getting in the realm of, is that fate? Is that what they mean back when they used to have Fortuna, the god Fortuna with her rudder? talking how.
Yeah, let me jump in. So we experience life differently depending on where we are. We're going to think differently when we're standing up as opposed to sitting down, as opposed to lying down, as opposed to walking. We're going to think differently when we're walking in nature as opposed to walking down a busy street. We're going to think differently when we're talking to other people as opposed to just thinking alone in our head. We're going to think differently when we wake up at 3 a.m. as opposed to 7 a.m., as opposed to 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. So time of day, location, what we're doing, all these things are going to have a profound effect on how we experience life. And so if you do the hard work, for example, let's say I prepare for a show and I had all sorts of topics lined up to discuss on this show, links to videos that I wanted to analyze, and I had that done days ago. So I could have gone live anytime this past week and I had material prepared. So generally speaking, the more prepared I am, the better the show. But if I'm prepared, that does not reduce the opportunity for spontaneity. It probably creates more room for the spontaneous because I have the safety net of all this preparation behind me, where when I need to catch my breath or to take a pause, I've got things that I can play. I've got notes that I've written down. And so talk radio programmers will tell their hosts, prepare your show the day before if possible, and then allow time to go past. You'll sleep on it, you'll live life, you'll go to a party, you'll walk down the street, and then new thoughts will occur to you. So it's not relying on magic, it's doing the right things and then go participate in something else, right? Step away from a problem, and often an answer will come to you when you're engaged in something completely outside of working on a problem. Pass.
Yeah. Yes, the mind is like a stew, and I know you've done this a million times yourself, Luke, to where you'll sit around and let the stew brew for a while, and then it comes time to talk about it, and you'll speak extemporaneously, and the things that come out of your mouth weren't necessarily the notes you prepared. By God, they were better. And then somebody else say, well, what do you think about that, Luke? And you'll say, well, by God, it's such a good thing. Let me think about it. I just said it. I hadn't even had time to think about it. Where'd that come from? You get what I'm saying? So there is a magic. Whether you want to call that magic's going to be, that gets too mystical for people. There's more going on. You know what I mean? There seems to be more to the universe than we let on, because it's like you'll realize sometimes, hey, that wasn't even my thought. That was better. I'm going to claim it. I'm going to claim it, but that wasn't even my thought. I seem like I got a little help there, but you were in the right headspace for that to come out. Anyway, I was going to make a couple of points, and you can.
Okay, let me just add one more thing. There's a terrific book on this. It's called The Extended Mind, and it talks about the different ways that our mind works depending on context, whether we are with other people, whether we're lying down, whether we're walking. Nietzsche, for example, said he wouldn't trust any thought that didn't come while he was walking. Okay, pass.
Mm-hmm. Psychologically speaking, we once lived in an age of being, to be, or not to be. They were being. Then with the Industrial Revolution and unfettered consumerism came the age of having. So we went from being to having and possessing. Now we've actually passed through that, Luke, and the social media age seems to be bringing us an age of appearing. So from being to having to appearing. Image and right thinking matter most. Truth and substance are long gone. Do you see that progression maybe to where it's like we're just along for the ride? You get all these tools around us, everything around us has such an effect on us that we went from being to having and possessing, being our mode, to now appearances and image is our mode. But because that matters most. It appears to the masses that matters most. You got anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think for most people, their life revolves around their family. And I think that was true 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, 10 years ago, and right now. On the other hand, people who don't have those normal levels of human connection, they are going to be much more flexible. They're going to be much more vulnerable. They're much more likely to get swept away by things such as social justice or social media or internet pornography or internet sports gambling. but for most people, they live a life embedded within their family, and for most people, that's the best way to live.
Right. I was going to say, if you'll think about the mind, it is a conjurer, and what it seems to conjure up 24/7 is desires. And sometimes it plagues me with thoughts, but mostly desires is what your mind, if left in its natural state after 35 years of existence, that's what it was doing to me. But in theory, once you've satiated the desires that you have today, Luke, there shouldn't be no desires, or even next month, theoretically, on that aisle, be it aisle 7 of the store, or at the Walmart, or at the hardware store, or whatever. It should be pure bliss for the foreseeable future, but desires magically reappear. It seems like to me that I used to spend way too much time trying to satiate desires, and then when I satiated those, boredom set in until I conjured up another desire. You get what I'm saying, Luke?
Okay. Yeah. Let me jump in. So I'm in the middle here. So I lived an aesthetic life at one point when I was quite ill. So I led a more mystical life, a more God-centered life, a more holy life, but I was incredibly lonely and isolated. And a religious friend of mine pointed out, I think your greatest need is community. Your greatest need is to become connected with other people. And so one of the things that I did to start getting reconnected with others while I was suffering from chronic illness is that I answered and placed a whole bunch of singles ads. And so when young women started coming to visit me, I started moving out of the mystical and holy world into a much more carnal world. And I had a conviction that there was a solution to what ailed me physically, but on the isolated path that I was on, neither myself nor my family were going to arrive at that solution. I had to expand my life as much as possible and to connect with people as deeply and intensely as possible to try to find a way out of this chronic fatigue syndrome. And one of the ways that I thought I will most intensely connect with others is by having sex with these women. And so the second woman that I had sex with on this kick had a great psychiatrist, and she lived on the other side of the country. But I followed her back to Orlando. I believed that she had a great psychiatrist, and I moved in with her in Orlando, Florida, and I went to her psychiatrist, and I got a pill that restored me to at least 2/3 of a normal life. So instead of being bedridden 20 hours a day, I was able to start living much of a normal life. My life was completely changed. Now, there are some downsides to that. I got hooked on promiscuous sex. I became something of a user. I blew up my relations with my parents, who were offended at the way that I was manipulating and using women. But I did move from the sickbed back to normal health. And so a complete ignoring of your desires is not, I think, the path to go. One wants to have a measure of detachment from one's desires, so one does not just simply become a desire pursuing machine. On the other hand, I desperately need, and most people desperately need, to connect with other people. And so an openness to connecting with other people, including through sex, is going to be of benefit to people who are otherwise way too isolated. And many of us, perhaps most of us, have problems that could be considerably ameliorated by a stronger connection with other people. And sometimes the way to do that will be sexual. Other times the way to do that will be primarily religious. But there are answers to many of our problems outside of us that we probably won't reach just on our own. They will often come much more easily through other people. So, for example, many Orthodox Jews experience in their Orthodox Jewish community that pretty much every major problem that they have, they can find some considerable amelioration of that problem within their community. Boss.
Right. I heard one guy say recently that he felt that we spend 50% of more of our life in what he called robot mode, or what you and I might call autopilot. You know, it's the way you kind of pass the time in a waiting room or whatever. And he thought one of the keys to life was to like catch yourself slipping into autopilot, robot mode, or whatever, and bringing yourself back to, being consciously aware. Whatever methods worked, some methods would work some people, and other methods would work from other people. But that's an interesting concept, isn't it? That like there's like an inner robot in us that will take over and drive the car, and sometimes you'll be like, wait a minute, I don't remember consciously driving this car for the last 2 minutes, but we're 2 miles further down the road. Have you ever noticed that there's like a robot inside loop?
Yeah, I got a thought on that. So robot mode serves us, just like comparisons with other people serve us. It's just inevitable that we will compare ourselves with others, and it is inevitable that robot mode will take over. On the other hand, there is a time and a place and a reason for expanding our awareness of the present moment. So there's nothing wrong with an appropriate use of robot mode, and there's many advantages to be gained at times from becoming more aware of the present moment.
A guy named Guy Debord in the 30s, he saw the coming of what he called the society of the spectacle forming, based on control and mass consumption, where the real is hidden and the irrelevant is what is promoted. I mean, the guy's not around anymore. This was something he promoted about 90 years ago, but I think we're there, don't you think? Think about what he's saying, where the real is hidden and the irrelevant is promoted. I mean,
I don't think that's true for people with family. Most people live lives that are immersed in their family, and what is real is their family. If you have children, if you have good relations with your siblings, with your parents, with your extended family, that is real, and that should be your primary concern, and that is what is a primary concern for most people. So I don't think most people are living lives removed from the real, because most people live lives that are immersed in family.
I had a couple more points, but I know you've just gotten into the day. Why don't I let you clear the chalkboard of Kip time and then get into Luke zone, and you can just, we can talk about it. This will give us something to talk about, because I had 3 more pages of notes, but I know I've taken up enough of the Lucosphere. Thanks,
okay,
bro.
Great. Thanks, bro. All right. Good talking to Kip. Let's move on. All right, as a deeper thoughts, well, they're not really mine. They come from Ronnie Goodman and his work, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression. So I just searched Ronnie Goodman's book for uses of the term embodied or embodiment. And the overarching theme is, how does our politics affect our physiology, and how does our physiology affect our politics? So liberalism upholds autonomous self-possession as the way to go, meaning autonomous self-possession means that you decide right and wrong on your own, that you decide meaning and purpose on your own, and that you can decide on your own a reasonable and useful and effective path for yourself in life. While from a traditional perspective, reason, purpose, right and wrong all exist outside of yourself, that there is a pre-existing moral order of which religion is just one expression, and that your duty in life is to fit in with that pre-existing order. While from a modern liberal secular humanist perspective, it's much more of an ethos of follow your bliss. You can decide all these things on your own. So liberalism upholds this particular conception of the self, which you saw embodied in the Moderators' performance in the presidential and vice presidential debates. But from a non-liberal perspective, this autonomous self-possession is really just the internalization of the new restraints and inhibitions of the disciplinary society that is the secularized version of Protestantism, right? Protestantism was a reform religious movement where you did away with the importance of rituals and the physical world, and you boiled religion down to an intellectual and perhaps emotional assent to a couple of dogmas that Jesus died for you. So you removed all the husk of religion from a Protestant perspective and just boiled down to, are you good with Jesus? And so the modern liberal identity is not this unvarnished natural lucidity and clarity as they see it. Rather, it is the embodiment of contingent historical forces, meaning it is the product of a secularized form of Protestantism, right? It's a new uniformization, a homogenization, and a rationalization of the Enlightenment. And so the Enlightenment narrative that people are basically good and can decide right and wrong, reason and purpose on their own is a secularized development on Protestantism's insights that religion boils down to your relationship with Jesus. It's what you feel in your heart about God, what you believe the path to salvation is. That's really all that matters in religion. So the modern secular approach and the Protestant approach are both liberations from tradition. I grew up a Protestant, and the word tradition is a dirty word in Protestantism because Protestantism sees itself as a liberation from tradition. In Roman Catholicism and in Judaism, right, tradition is a positive thing. But liberals, from a non-liberal perspective, overlook that this autonomous self-possession, this innerness, is a blind convention in its own right. It's the outcome of particular historical Enlightenment processes that undergirds these liberal ideals. So there is a higher truth that conservative claims of cultural oppression are arguing for. Liberals may be the ones who most ardently defend science and naturalism, but it is conservatives who are the most viscerally natural at their primordial level of embodied human experience. So from a non-liberal perspective, our thinking is profoundly shaped by all sorts of pre-cognitive processes, such as our genetics and our early imprinting, and that genetics and early imprinting are far more powerful forces on how people really behave than their use of reason. So liberals see their principled high-mindedness is distinguished from conservatives' hidebound prejudice, egoism. But what liberals dismiss as the politically opportunistic swiping of progressive lingo reflects conservatives' more natural, less rational understanding of human beings, right? That conservatives' non-liberal sense that liberalism's official rational morality grows out of a pre-rational identity that is then imposed alongside what purports to be moral idealism. So liberalisms don't see the broader historical context of their particular idea of autonomy, of their idealism, because they are very much creatures of the Enlightenment, and so they view reason as the driving force for people, as opposed to genetics and imprinting. And so they see this reason as disembodied, as opposed to a non-liberal perspective, which recognizes that what happens in our brain is profoundly affected by our body. And that we think differently when we're out for a walk, when we're with other people, when we're sitting down, when we're standing up, when we're lying down, when we're walking in nature as opposed to a busy street. All these things that are going on outside of our brain are going to have a profound effect on how our brain works. Right, but liberalism tends to see the human use of reason as disembodied, while non-liberals recognize that human reason occurs within a body that is profoundly affected by what's going on around it and how it's being used. So from a non-liberal perspective, liberals are vastly overconfident of their ability to recognize oppression and inequality, because the conscious categories through which liberals distinguish their own cosmopolitan idealism from the narrow parochialism of conservatives captures only a fraction of what transpires at the default level of our unconscious functioning, in the merely animal of human nature, right? Where liberalism's neural abstractions lose all meaning. So let's get a little bit of analysis here that talks about the moderators.
Disgusting aggravation. You know this little nerdy, dweeby little man over on CNN named Daniel Dale, who does fact checks supposedly against both sides? He's super fair, Eric. Well, this guy decides to tell us how the falsehoods shook out between these two candidates. And here is his conclusion.
Jake, what stood out was that this was a staggeringly dishonest debate performance from former President Trump. Just lie after lie on subject after subject. By my preliminary count, Jake, Trump made at least 33 false claims, 33. By contrast, by, again, a preliminary count, Vice President Harris made at least one false claim, though she added at least a few misleading claims and a few more that lack key context. I think a lot of Americans say, well, all politicians lie. No major presidential candidate before Donald Trump has ever lied with this kind of frequency. A remarkably large chunk of what he said tonight was just not true. And this wasn't like little exaggeration, political spin. A lot of his false claims were untethered to reality. On abortion, saying every Democrat wanted Roe v. Wade overturned, though actually more than 80% of Democrats supported Roe. On crime, saying it's through the roof, though it's actually sharply down since early 2023. It's now lower than it was since Trump left office. On healthcare, saying he's the one who saved Obamacare, the law he actually repeatedly tried to overturn. On Kamala Harris herself, saying that a Howard University grad, Black Law Students Association president, had claimed that she wasn't black at one point. Frankly, I don't have enough time here to run through each specific Trump false claim. I urge people to go to our CNN website or our app to read our team's detailed fact checks on this and a whole bunch more.
Wow. Wow, I
Just
don't even
one.
want to start with that.
Just
one. So
one from Kamala Harris. And I believe it's the fracking lie where she claimed that she had said she wasn't going to ban fracking, which she never said. She only said Joe Biden wouldn't ban fracking. She never reversed her plan and stated belief that it should be banned. And by the way, where was his fact check? Even Snopes has fact checked the find people on both sides lie and the bloodbath lie, her claims about abortion, her claims about Trump and IVF, the Trump abortion ban line. She kept saying Trump's abortion.
Milton was racing toward Florida. The death toll now at least 21, a couple of million people without power. The media were part of the message. Again and again, they warned, take this storm seriously. Evacuate if you can. This is a once-in-a-century monster hurricane. TV correspondents did what they always do with extreme weather, stand in the wind and rain for live reports.
I walked off the camera to get in the vehicle to just try to grab a moment of solace. This tree just collapsed, as you can see, and there is debris and vegetation flying around.
The water now is really starting to pour over. If you look at the graph, whoa, okay, that wasn't good. We'll probably go inside shortly.
Anderson really got whacked there. But even as so many lives were threatened, partisan maneuvering became a growing part of the story, covered by the press with gale force intensity. Kamala Harris unloaded on Ron DeSantis when the Florida governor didn't take her calls about the approaching hurricane.
These are the height of emergency situations. It's just utterly irresponsible, and it is selfish, and it is about political gamesmanship.
My focus has not been on dealing with Kamala Harris. I saw the news report. I didn't know she tried to contact me. But I'd also say it's not about you, Kamala. Right. It's about the people of Florida.
Donald Trump said the FEMA response to Hurricane Helene has been way too slow and blamed the vice president.
They had rescue helicopters that could have easily be sent, and there was just no coordination. But instead, Kamala recorded a podcast known for its graphic content. Can you believe it? She did nothing as people struggled and drowned.
President Biden pointed the finger at his predecessor for spreading misinformation.
Former President Trump has led the onslaught of lies. Assertions have been made that property is being confiscated. That's simply not true. They're saying the money is needed for this crisis is being diverted to migrants. What a ridiculous thing to say.
Get a life, man. Help these people.
We should call her Hurricane Harris because she interferes where she's not wanted and she leaves a mess in her wake.
All of the local leaders, all of the state officials, Republican and Democratic alike, are saying this administration is doing everything that we have asked of it.
It may be impossible to separate politics from a national emergency 3 weeks before the election, but that's the hyper-polarized world we live in. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this.
So this conservative and Republican distrust of expertise and seeming embrace of ignorance is something much deeper going on. And I'll get to that in a minute.
To analyze the coverage, Molly Hemingway, editor dying from these two mega storms that hit Florida.
It's a completely ridiculous focus for the media, given what we've just experienced. This is the deadliest storm to hit this country in 20 years. You have at least 250 people killed in sometimes horrific fashion, you know, babies being swept away from their parents, complete houses sliding underneath mud, bodies are buried in the mud, so we don't even know how many people are killed. And so much of the media focus seems to be about defending the federal government's response, which is such a contrast to what we saw in the Katrina hurricane, when that was just a complete open free-for-all against George Bush and his handling of that hurricane. But now the media seem to think their whole job is to protect the federal government.
Leslie, it seems to me the media are at least as interested, maybe.
Okay, so what's going on with conservative distrust of expertise? Right, Axios has an article here. Hurricanes test limits of Trump's war on experts. A second Donald Trump presidency would usher in a new type of class warfare, empowering populists to steamroll mainstream experts on issues such as climate change, economics, and public health. My position's in the middle. Sometimes I think the experts are right, and sometimes I think the populists and the people are right. I don't think either the people or the experts are inherently more likely to be right. Why it matters. This year's devastating hurricane season has exposed the perils of Trump's war on climate. Experts have long warned that human-caused global warming is exacerbating extreme weather. Trump, who was potentially 23 days from winning back the White House, has sought to weaponize the Biden administration's hurricane response while downplaying the existence of climate change. As President Trump withdrew from the U.S. from the Paris Agreement, publicly disavowed a landmark climate report by his own government. The MAGA movement's crusade against experts has become fundamental to its anti-establishment identity. Take Trump's populist trade policies. Mainstream economists overwhelmingly oppose his plans for massive tariffs, but the disaffected MAGA base considers that criticism a badge of honor. J.D. Vance noted, you say trust the experts, but those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. I remember one expert, conservative economist Russell Roberts, who was my professor for 2 quarters at UCLA, he said that he supported free trade, and that half the reason that he supported free trade with China is that it was good for China. So the well-being of the Chinese was equally important to American Russell Roberts as the well-being of Americans. I used to be very much an advocate of free trade. Donald Trump has brought me around to the virtues at times of protective tariffs. So right now, I want to try to stay in the middle. I like the way that Reagan conducted things. He had both free traders and protectionists in his cabinet. And in some things, the protectionists would win out, and other things, the free traders would win out. So depending on circumstances and depending on sector, probably a more free or a more protected policy is probably better. But what's the foundation for this distrust of expertise? And so conservatives tend to be much more individualist, and they tend to be much more free-spirited because they have much more of a porous identity. They recognize that all sorts of things going outside of them are going to affect them. This is a more medieval worldview where people experience emotions much more intensely. They will go from giddy to sad to angry to resigned within a very short time, as opposed to the buffered, rational, liberal way of approaching life. So from a non-liberal perspective, ideas need to be understood in the context of their pre-cognitive, their pre-theoretical psychocultural embodiments. Instead, we should think of ideas in the forms of our lived experience, of which political ideas are just one expression, right? So usually your ideology will be a projection of your personality, right? Your ideology is the way that you throw a spotlight on the cultural landscape in which you live. So liberalism and conservatism are not just opposing ideas, they are opposing ways of being. They throw different spotlights on life. They each give differing levels of resonance to some ideas and not others. So from a right-wing perspective, the greatest threats are disorder and impurity and outsiders messing things up. And from a right-wing perspective, traditional ways of organizing families and communities are usually better than untested ways. From a left-wing perspective, the worst things are ignorance and bigotry and people on the left tend to be much more open to new ideas about how to organize a human life. So political ideology is not just a cluster of principles through which events in the world are self-consciously conceptualized, but like personality, the lens through which the world first appears to us prior to us explicitly forming beliefs. So from a non-liberal perspective, there are all sorts of forces which are far more powerful and important than the pure reason of disembodied, strategic, autonomous, reflexive individuals. So from a traditional perspective, we recognize that often our emotions will give us a more effective way of operating than trying to figure things out on our own, or following tradition, or following the wise counsel of our elders will often be superior to what we think is best. So liberals and conservatives are divided by indelible psychological and physiological differences, right? We have a genetic base and we have early experiences that predispose us to different types of politics and different approaches to life. So people who are not liberal recognize that political ideologies are physiologically embodied, right? We operate from all these imperceptible cues of our bodily hexus. Hexus is a fancy word for disposition. So our bodily disposition is political mythology realized and embodied. It's turned into a permanent disposition about life. It is a durable manner of standing, speaking, and feeling and thinking about life. It's a disposition that constitutes a pattern of postures, both physical, psychological, physiological, that is both individual and it's systemic. And these postures have a whole variety of social meanings and values depending on the context in which they're operating. And so they will pass from practice to practice without going through much discussion or even conscious awareness. So we have all sorts of reasons that prior to thinking, prior to operating our cognitive facilities, we have pre-verbal comportment that usually will carry a political significance. So we have parts of our brain that light up to threat. I think the amygdala. And there are the studies that show that this part of the brain, I think the amygdala, tends to be larger in conservatives than in liberals. So conservatives tend to be much more sensitive to threat than liberals. So this disposition that we have towards life, right, is the physiological and instinctual embodiment of what later becomes reflected as ideas. So that liberal-looking girl's coy smile is just a reflection of the temperamental and physiological embodiment of her overall worldview. So you have some conservatives at elite universities who adopt cigarette smoking and who get angry at cigarette smoking bans. And so why do they take up cigarette smoking? Right? It's not often a conscious political rebellion, right? It's often more of an embodiment of non-liberal values rather than an articulation of them, right? For reasons they never quite understood, smoking will feel like a rebellion against the elite's moral consensus that the two most important things in life are for everyone to be happy and for everyone to get along. So that's one reason why conservatives tend to be less upset about cigarette smoking.
J.D. Vance put on a masterclass in how to handle biased moderators and a lying opponent, and it was a thing of beauty. It was beautiful. It was like every Republican or Republican voter or person who, in this case, is rooting for Trump knows exactly what I am feeling right now, which is just, thank God. It just listening to a guy go out there and know how to raise the right points in response to the right questions, to not take the moderator's bullshit.
Right, Christopher Lasch understood this. He noted that upper middle class liberals don't understand the importance of class differences in shaping their attitudes toward life. They fail to reckon with the class dimension of their obsession with health and moral uplift. They find it hard to understand why their hygienic conception of life fails to command universal enthusiasm. So it is these upper middle class liberals who have mounted an effective crusade to sanitize American society, to create a smoke-free environment, to censor everything from pornography to hate speech, and at the same time to incongruously extend the range of personal choice in matters where most people feel the need of solid moral guidelines. And then when they are confronted with resistance to these initiatives, they betray the venomous hatred that lies not far beneath the smiling face of upper middle-class benevolence. So conservatives see themselves as usually more tolerant than liberals because they equate liberalism with this hygienic conception of life that manifests differently in a wide range of spheres. So smoking can qualify as a political act because it is a rebellion against this hygienic conception of life that liberals seek to impose upon the rest of us. So it is this liberalism as a social identity and as an automatic social reflex that has become credentialed as the embodiment of the privileged intellectual brain, right? If you think clearly, you have this hygienic, automatically liberal social reflex. So just as we used to have classic finishing schools that strove to inculcate a certain physical posture, so now the elite universities try to inculcate a certain mental and spiritual posture through which to announce oneself as curious, broad-minded, given to scientific detachment and dispassionate analysis. That is, you are a member of the anointed in good standing. Another way of understanding liberal conservative differences is father morality versus mother morality. Right? Conservatives will often suspend their usual hostility to government spending when it comes to the military because the military embodies strict father values, hierarchical authority, self-discipline, building strength, fighting evil. And so these may be publicly subsidized without offending traditional conservative values. Education spending, on the other hand, tends to be wasteful because educators are mostly nurturers standing in the way of strict father morality. Conservatives support the freedom to own guns while opposing the freedom to abort a fetus because guns are seen as the individual's form of protection in a hostile world, and they are symbolic of the male role as family protector. By contrast, abortion symbolizes the corruption of parental indulgence, represents a child's failure to learn from her mistakes or a woman's preference for career above motherhood, and these are all affronts to strict father morality. So strict father morality much more embodies the pre-modern conviction that individual and communal flourishing depend upon upholding a wider order of things. So the ostensible concerns of conservatives are modern, but the deeper impetus behind those concerns is pre-modern. Right? The goal isn't just to uphold a certain conduct, but to uphold the wider moral order that sustains that conduct. So deviation from the wider order, such as having a trans identity, goes beyond mere immorality, right? It is an offense against the order of things. Religion is just one outlet for this conservative devotion to a pre-existing order and a pre-existing moral order. So disgust plays a much more significant and intense role for conservatives as opposed to liberals. So you'll have a liberal philosopher like Martha Nussbaum arguing that disgust distorts moral clarity. And so when we moralize our disgust reaction from a liberal perspective, we are externalizing our primal sense of animal vulnerability onto social outsiders. And we turn them into embodiments of our own human frailty that we want to deny. And anger will often track real danger in a reliable way, but when it comes to disgust from a liberal perspective, it is intrinsically unreasonable because it embodies magical ideas of contamination and impossible aspirations to purity, immortality, and non-animality. Whoa! From a traditional perspective, right, disgust is an important human reaction and an important moral and psychological guide. And striving for purity and immortality and human transformation towards the divine are simply attempts to meet our obligations to a profound pre-existing order. So the autonomous strategic self is what liberals uphold, right? It's a disembodied brain. It's a disembodied ego. It's the subject who can objectify everything and therefore achieve total self-possession, but it is, from a conservative perspective, an impossible aspiration. So it is in community and in society that our identities are revealed to us, right? Our identities develop in our social relations, and they refer us to our place within a larger order. And without this larger order, we cannot be ourselves, right? I only recognize myself in relationship to a larger order. So that's one reason why I'm not a liberal. And so from a traditional perspective, individuals just cannot readily alter social meanings at will. That the force of community and the force of incentives to stay connected to people who are valuable to us is far stronger for most people than their ability to reason strategically. So from a conservative perspective, the liberal total self-possession of the strategic agent is an illusion, because we only understand ourselves in relationship to other people who are important to us. That meaning is something that we encounter in the world rather than something we create in our head. So from a traditional conservative, right-wing, tribalist, nationalist perspective, meaning is something we encounter. From a liberal perspective, it's something that we create and develop in our own heads. So meaning is something we encounter in concrete fashion in the wider world. From a liberal perspective, it is a disembodied interior view. So from a conservative perspective, meaning is created by the social world around us that then calls on us to conform to a pre-existing moral order. So in one sense, this liberal strategic conception of the human agent is natural in that it seems to free us from religion, but it's also in tension with naturalism as it conceals the physiological and culturally embodied nature of our consciousness. So liberals characterize the prejudice of conservatives as a failure to follow enlightenment, that we are acting from our irrational animus. But from a conservative perspective, what is often called prejudice is an unwillingness to transcend our embodied, socially, physiologically embodied state towards some imaginary higher state of spiritual purity and freedom where we can just decide everything within our buffered identity, within our own mind. So from a traditional and conservative perspective, we don't want the type of emotional asceticism that enables this liberal view of transcendence and autonomy. So from a traditional perspective, liberalism is a secularized version of religious reform. It's a secularized version of Protestantism. It's a type of spirituality. It's not a disembodied intellectual rigor. It is this particular type of spirituality that impels liberals to highlight America's historical male moral failings at the expense of its moral achievements, to judge America's record by a standard higher than is applied to other nations, higher than the history of the human race indicates is reasonable. This is why conservatives feel that the left has made America's entire history hostage to the legacy of slavery, and why the left loves to highlight America's failings to invalidate any aspect of our culture as being particularly worthy. Right? American culture from a left-wing perspective must be invalidated because it is incompatible with this secularized asceticism, which the elites seek to institutionalize as the only way of being thoughtful. It's just another weapon in the arsenal of liberal ideology.
It was really cleansing. It was just, you never see it. It's just so great to see. The moderators are gross. Margaret Brennan, not only do you desperately need some bronzer, you need to understand how to moderate a fair debate when you have half the country who's rooting for the other guy. She didn't even attempt to be fair. I mean, I'm going to utter words I never thought I would utter. I preferred Norah O'Donnell. Actually, oh my God. This Margaret Brennan, she used to have a reputation as being kind of like reasonable. Like she flirted with the Catholic right, the Christian right, and when you get on issues of faith, she could be kind of like normal. No. She's been in the soup too long. She's gone totally native over there at CBS News. You were terrible, madam. Terrible. The moderators were disgusting, but J.D. Vance was a vision. And Tim Walz really did indeed look like the bumbling knucklehead he said he was. Oh, there's so much to go over. We have a full lineup of guests for you tonight. We've got in-depth analysis on what we just witnessed and what it will mean.
Okay, back to the insights of Ronnie Goldman in his terrific book, Conservative Claims of Cultural Oppression. So the ultimate way of showing that you are an intellectual is to adopt a liberal worldview, right? That you are disengaged from the world, that you're able to overcome traditional and religious prejudices, right? That you have a disembodied perspective. And from a conservative perspective, right, this is a delusion, right? So conservatives appear to liberals as uncivilized, as the half-savage relics of past times, because conservatives don't try to realize the ethos of disengaged self-control and self-reflexivity, but instead seek to expose it as a cultural pretense, as the manipulation of symbolic, prestigious ways of being, and that it is fundamentally untrue to what people are actually like. And there is a particular way of speaking that shows that you are a member of the new class, a member of the elite, right? And this is the careful critical discourse that treats the world and relationships and objects as a relationship between judges and the judged, right? You see it and you heard it in the Moderators' performance in the Kamala Harris-Donald Trump debate and in the J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz debate, right? The Moderators were acting as the judges and the Republican candidates were the judged. So this careful critical discourse implies that there is this established social hierarchy and that there are these important distinctions between those who speak and understand truly and those who do not. And so when you participate in the culture of critical discourse, you're emancipated from tradition and from the bigotry of religion, and you are subverting traditional hierarchies. So this is a political act. So religious reform, as embodied by Protestantism, moved us from an era in which religion was embodied and enfleshed and ritualized to one where religion became something that was much more in the head. So faith in God was originally experienced as a concrete way of being, as the opening up of one being towards another. Only later in the modern era did it become propositional. So I grew up a Seventh-day Adventist Protestant Christian where belief in God was regarded as an either-or cognitive belief, right? Either you believe or you don't believe. For traditional Jews, right, who have a different approach to God, it's often a familiarity with God that may bring with it a sense of contempt. It's rarely this either-or perspective of Protestant Christians. So with the rise of Protestantism, you first got religion as primarily associated with thinking and with acting righteously. So with the rise of Protestantism, you got a discipline from people that they were moving from a sense of a porous identity where they were profoundly affected by forces outside of them to becoming vessels of a higher power that was buffered. So earlier Christianity made numerous compromises with paganism and its embodied undisciplined and unreflective forms of spirituality. Also, that's true with Judaism. Now, with Protestantism, you get the religious reformers demanding a complete break with the past. So what was formerly the essence of religion was now condemned as carnal and an example of sinful pride. Often, Christians will condemn Jews as being carnal because Judaism is the most this-worldly focus of the world's religions. So Christianity has as its ultimate goal the next world, and there is a focus on salvation to the next world. So it's much easier for Christianity to be spiritual. It's a much more romantic religion than Judaism, which is primarily focused on how we behave in the here and now. So with religious reform, you had the removal of religion from the carnal. Religion became propositional. Either you believe or you don't believe. And that then resulted in liberalism, which is just a secularized version of Protestantism. Right? So religious feeling used to be experienced in the body where the sacred was enacted through various physical rituals, but that became stigmatized as mere sensuality, carnality, and impulse. It was a threat to religious and intellectual clarity. So the reason that liberals believe that public policy making cannot be permitted to fall into the hands of the American people, this is because the American people refuse the buffered distance, the strategic autonomous liberal perspective, because the American people are way too mired in their unreflective folkways. They are too indulgent of their embodied religious feelings to accede to the civilizing process that liberals feel that they must spread to them. And the elites are despised because they have become the symbolic embodiment of the buffered identity. What constitutes a member of the elite? Other members of the elite consider you elite. So usually you will go to an elite university, you'll get elite degrees by following the precepts of the elite, and you get their stamp of authority. So conservatives resent this perspective, right? They feel like they have a special insight into liberalism's campaign of stealth and subterfuge, and the liberal conviction that liberals' verbal eloquence is moral clarity, while from a conservative perspective, it's just glib and shallow, that they are missing the deeper layers of meaning to which conservatives are far more attuned. So the patriotism of conservatives is much more carnal. It's much more visceral. They will revere the flag, right? From a liberal perspective, right, conservatives should graduate from a carnal patriotism to the embodied feelings of the higher strategic autonomous self. So John Kerry didn't get much political mileage from his Vietnam record because his persona was quintessentially buffered. It was haughty, it was French-looking, it was marked by an out-of-touch aristocratic bearing. And Americans who had a more porous identity found it repellent. So from a conservative perspective, the elites are out of touch with the lived experience of ordinary Americans, and that this detachment is not from empirical reality, but it results rather from a particular cosmological orientation that developed as a result of the Enlightenment, as a result of contingent forces. Contingent mean dependent upon. So liberal identity is based on an ethos of disengaged self-control and self-reflexivity. That means the ability to monitor yourself. And this places it in direct conflict with those whose patriotism resists that ethos. So liberals insist that their patriotism is the reflective, intellectual patriotism of the Constitution and of ideas and principles, rather than the unreflective patriotism of blood and soil and language. So liberals will accuse conservatives of worshiping ignorance. But what appears as the worship of ignorance is really just another means of opposing the buffered strategic autonomous distance and its disciplinary impulses pushed forward by liberalism. So intellectuals and experts are usually the foremost embodiments of these liberal strategic autonomous buffered impulses, right? And so the elite become natural targets for conservatives who see intellectualism and expertise as just another emanation of an all-pervasive liberalism that must be fought on every front.
Home. He brought it back to the economy and the American dream and how we need to revive it. He constantly made the point that Kamala Harris is in power now, and why hasn't she done all these wonderful things that she's promising? The only thing that was difficult for him, I think, was the January 6th thing right at the end. That's not his fault.
Yep,
you know,
right.
Donald Trump has created that vulnerability, but he.
Okay, Claire Khaw, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind? Okay, Claire Khaw is not there, so.
Deflected really deftly there as well.
By while muted, apologies.
Okay.
I want to ask about the title of your stream, Decoding the Role of the Body in the Body Politic. I'm afraid I missed the more nuanced discussion about that. I thought maybe we could discuss that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I appreciate that. So it seems to me that I can usually tell someone's politics just by looking at them, that there are physical manifestations and there are manners and there are ways of speaking and there are ways of dressing and ways of living that reflect different forms of politics. And also the opposite is also true, that our politics comes from our predispositions. So, for example, the higher you are in the personality trait of conscientiousness, the more likely you are to be on the right politically. The higher you are in the personality trait of openness, the more likely you are to be on the left. And so I think the basis for our politics has a significant genetic component. And then I think when we take on a different politics, that it reflects in our body. So I think Tucker Carlson came across differently when he embodied a more populist approach as opposed to when he had a more elite approach and wore a bow tie. And so I'm curious in how the body both shapes and reflects our different type of politics. And I'm going to bring Halsey English back into the show. Halsey, long time, no talk. What's going on with you, bro?
Nothing much, man. How you been?
Good, man. So you just started streaming again. So
I did about 2 weeks ago.
What brought that about, and what's been your experience resuming live streaming?
So, I mean, it's a longer story that I'm willing to tell at the moment, but I stopped because I got insanely busy with work and family and everything else going on. And I was going through a lot of crap that like I wanted to keep more of a low profile.
Yeah.
So like 1 month turned into 2, turned into 3, and then it just became harder and harder to get back into it. And recently you know what, I've had a bit more time, and I've kind of, with everything that's going on with Israel, with everything that's going on with the kind of new rise of the pretend alt-right, like I just felt like it was time, and so I came back. But since there's so many like days off this month for the holidays, like I said I would only do one night a week. Now, of course, I didn't hold to that. I've been doing almost every day since, but I've just like, I haven't had any guests or anything like that. I've just been doing AMAs.
And so is live streaming like riding a bike? Once you've learned to ride a bike, you can just get back on even if you haven't ridden a bike in 5 years?
I don't think so. I think it's just it's simple. Like I'm not having any problems, but whenever I do have like a question catches me off guard or anything, I just always say like, "Hey guys, I'm a little rusty. Give me a break."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But like it's funny because I put it out on Twitter and
Okay, we lost you for the last 30 seconds.
I have to look into something. I can't. Hello? Can you hear
Yeah,
me
I
now?
lost you the last 40
Can you
seconds.
hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I'm sorry about that.
No problem. Oh man,
Okay, where did I stop?
So just
This
develop.
sucks.
Yeah, just
Hold on.
Yeah.
How's that better?
Yeah, I think so. So just go ahead and develop any thought that might be on your mind.
So no, I was saying that like I put a lot of like I always put requests out like, hey, if you guys actually want me to look into something, or if I don't have enough, data on it, instead of surprising me, send me the question early. So if give me some time to ponder it before I ask it. And funny enough, I've been getting at least 50% of questions being asked about like relationships and dating and stuff like that. And I feel like Dr. Phil half the time. But it's still fun. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy it, and I feel like I'm helping people, but it does get a little weird.
What do you think about Mama JF going missing? Do you think that JF Garapi may have played a sinister role in her seeming demise?
No comment.
I had to try on that one.
I don't know. Look, honestly, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what happened. I didn't look into it enough. Like I just saw she went missing, and like a lot of people have been trolling and saying he killed her or whatever. But I don't know. That would mean he's at a level of psycho that like none of us could have anticipated. No, I don't see it. Like I see he's he's always been fine with me, but I don't see him being like a murderer. But then again, whoever like thinks like, oh, that person's definitely a murderer,
Right. I mean, there does seem to be a lot of suspicious behavior on his part around that time.
As I said, I was barely online. So I don't know, like, I haven't spoken to anybody about it. I haven't gotten any, like, I've just heard people say like, oh, he probably killed her, but I don't know, like I don't know what he was at. I think I kind of like avoiding it. I don't, like, I just considered it internet drama, and I really hate internet drama. So I ignored it. Now I'm at the point where I still haven't done anything different. I just see people like posting on
Oh God, Halsey, you're fading out again. I don't know why the connection's so bad. But let's keep trying. What's your
where I am shitty reception.
Okay, let's just try one more time. What kind of direction do you think Israel's going in? Do you think it's a productive, winning direction? What's your perspective on Israel and its many wars?
I think that we're all finally seeing what it looks like to actually more, and I think that people are that's why it's freaking out the left so bad, and that's why the right is kind of like clapping along. That's just what I think. I think that pager thing changed everything, because all we've heard about intelligence services for like the last 10 years has been how evil they are and how they spy on their own citizens and fuck everyone over. And now all of a sudden, like, they pulled something off that if you had brought that into like a series that deals with like international, counterterrorism and all that, said, look, I have this great idea for a series, and you laid out the pager thing, they would laugh you out of the room as being completely unrealistic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely stunning. Is there a coherent and winning strategy behind Israel's actions? What do you think Israel's strategy is?
I don't think they have a coherent strategy, to be honest with you. But I think their overall policy, and this is affected by politics as well, but their overall policy is just, we're not going to take shit anymore, to the extent that they can. Like, I think that Netanyahu was at a point where he realized that, like, either he wins whatever this war is and whatever he considers winning, or he just keeps fighting it to a large extent, or he's going to probably be kicked out of office, and then who knows what happens afterwards. Because if they held an election, I would say 6 months ago, I'd say there's a pretty good chance he loses. And if he loses, then he's at the whims of the left in Israel, who want his head, and his co-politicians who wouldn't do anything to protect him. And it doesn't take much for the intelligence services to bring up, like, oh well, we think he let 10/7 happen. And then I think he saw all that in the writing on the wall, and he's like, okay, well, I either do that, or I just become the person that everyone claims I am anyway, and just crush my enemies.
Now, Bibi has had a reputation for caution. He's on the right, and so many ignorant people think that Bibi is just some kind of warmonger. But the Bibi that we've seen in the past month is unlike any other Bibi that we've seen before. Is that fair?
Yeah, because he was always just a politician. Like,
Yeah.
that's why people didn't like him. That's why in Israel he generally wasn't like a loved politician. He just happens to get like enough people together to string together like a small coalition every time that he's been elected. But people generally don't like him there. And when I was there, when people would talk about Bibi, you'd say, oh, what do you think of him? And they'll go, oh, he gives good speeches, meaning he sounds great, but he never does the shit that he says he's going to do. So I think that now people are accepting more that he's willing to go the extra mile to do it. I don't think he's a warmonger. I don't think he's like a Genghis Khan or a Hitler or anything. I think that's just all media nonsense. But I think he's willing to actually go far enough to maybe finish the job.
So when I looked at videos of Iran's ballistic missile attack on October 1, it looked like my own lying eyes indicated to me that 90% of the missiles were getting through, as opposed to the official line that 90% of the missiles were intercepted. What do you think happened? I think it's entirely possible that Israel was damaged, or at least recognizes its own vulnerability much more keenly than it's saying publicly.
No, I think that people, like, I'm not accusing you of ignorance or anything, but I don't think you understand the value of missile defense. Missile defense is not just shooting missiles out of the sky. Basically, anyone could do that. Like, anyone in an advanced Western country, you could do that with fighter jets. But the issue is if someone shoots 400 missiles at you or 1,000 missiles at you, and you intercept all of them, you'll literally go bankrupt in like 2 months. Like, the cost of the interceptor missiles is like $1,000,000 each. So it's the radar systems that actually make them valuable, because they can understand the trajectory of the missiles and they know where they're going to land. So if it's not going to land in a place that matters, they just let it land. Because what does it matter if it lands in open space or it's not going to hit anything? So and with like the Iron Dome, the whole genius of it is that the radar understands its trajectory as it's rising. With ballistic missiles and with missiles that can be fired on in a volley from that far, you can also it's much easier to do. That's why these systems have been online so much longer than the Iron Dome, is they can actually use radar to detect them on the way down as well.
Right. So Iran has about 3,000 ballistic missiles. How much damage do you think that Iran could inflict with all of its ballistic missiles if they attack Israel in a more intense fashion?
Oh, haven't you heard my ranting about this? It's one of the primary things I rant about. How much damage could they do? Probably the same amount you've seen.
Yeah.
None. The entire Iran, Hezbollah, Russia access is based on the fact that we don't learn anything from the past, in that Russia's stuff has never worked. Ever. It's all propaganda. Every single time you hear about Russia just transferred the new super laser powered, you know, omnipotent missile defense system to Iran, and this thing can shoot anything out of the sky. It's bullshit. No, it's never worked anywhere. And Russia always has an excuse as to why it doesn't work. They supposedly transferred it to Syria years ago, and yet Israeli jets enter Syrian airspace and do whatever the hell they want, like at will. And whenever the Syrians or anyone say, "Hey, well, how come Russia's super advanced system isn't shooting them out of the air?" They'll say, "Oh, well, Russia didn't transfer operational, you know, control of it over to the Syrians because they're afraid it could start World War III. So Russia exercised restraint and just let Israel bomb whatever they wanted." It's the same crap we got in the Cold War, that they were always coming out with a new missile defense system, a new intercontinental ballistic missile that could defeat anything, a new fighter jet that never existed, or anything. They would hold these parades in the middle of Red Square with missiles that didn't work. Do I think they have nukes? Yes, because they stole the tech from us. And do I think they have missiles that can reach the US? Sure, but nobody's using nukes. It's a guaranteed mutually assured destruction, and I don't think anyone other than maybe some ridiculous Islamic lunatics would consider that okay. But Putin doesn't consider that okay. So take nukes off the table. The rest of their stuff is garbage, and it can't do anything. And Iran knows that. Iran's not that stupid that they believe they could do something. Otherwise, they would. Like, what's stopping them from doing something? For years, everyone said Israel can never take on Hezbollah. They have 100,000 precision-guided missiles that can strike anywhere in Israel at any time. They'll hit the nuclear reactor at Dimona. They'll flatten Tel Aviv. They'll hit Jerusalem. They'll do whatever they want because they can. And it's just not true. I mean, if you believe the, oh, we're still gauging our response thing, like, Israel annihilated all of their leadership. They blew their peckers off with pagers. Like, do you really think Hezbollah is waiting for a better time to strike? Like, I don't think so. It's just because Russia's shit doesn't work.
And so, what do you think is the potential for what Israel can do now in retaliation to Iran? We've had a long pause between the Iranian ballistic missile attack of October 1. I'm wondering to myself, does Israel think that it's more vulnerable than it expected, and so it's being more cautious? How do you interpret that?
I don't think that they're being cautious or uncautious. I think they're just doing what they have to do to minimize soldier casualties. Like, there's a gazillion conspiracy theories, right? Like, Israel wants to take Lebanon as part of Greater Israel. They want to flatten Iran and draw America into the war. All of that is bullshit. What they want to do with Lebanon is just enforce 1701, which says that Hezbollah deploys behind the Litani River, and that the Lebanese army takes up positions on the border, which is what they want. It's what they've always wanted. The UN just never allowed that to happen. The peacekeepers there just let Hezbollah do whatever they wanted. So I think that Israel's I don't know what their strategic goal is in Gaza, because I don't know if you can even have one. because there is no plausible idea of what you could do for the day after unless you find a way to kick them all out, which would be optimal. I don't see how they do it.
What can Israel do to Iran?
Israel could do whatever it wanted to Iran. That was what happened last time when Iran shot all those ballistic missiles and none of them hit. The first time, Israel's response was to use a version of the Sparrow missile, which is basically a missile that was developed for missile defense and then turned into an offensive weapon as well. And they shot it, I believe, from Jordan and hit an exact target, 1,000 miles or 1,500 miles away from one jet. And they just let them know that, like, everywhere in Iran is a target that we can hit. Whereas they can shoot 1,000 missiles at Israel, and the chances they hit something are 50-50 tops.
So what are some criteria that we can use to try to ascertain whether Israel's winning or losing? For me, one set of criteria is, are people moving back to southern Israel next to Gaza because they are confident that the IDF has Gaza under control? And another test is, will Israelis move back to the north of Israel because Hezbollah has been brought under control? And then another test is, are smart Israelis staying, or are they moving overseas? Are more Jews moving to Israel, particularly of the highly capable, intelligent variety, or are they fleeing from Israel? So those are two ways. Go ahead.
The numbers are showing that more people are immigrating than emigrating. That's just a fact. Which is funny because it falls in line with Israel's history. Whenever there's like tougher times, you see more people immigrate than emigrate. And when things are going really well, you see more people start to emigrate because they can find opportunities overseas and they don't feel like kind of a patriotic duty to stay there. What do I think about the South? The South doesn't have that many people in it to begin with. Would I like to see those communities go back and be completely safe? Sure. But I think the vast majority of reason they're not is just because if anything, they're in the way. Like, Israel's doing a job down there and doesn't need to worry about very small communities that are on a border and have to worry about protecting them as well as waging an offensive war. So I think that whenever whatever this is done, I think they'll all just go back. And the ones in the north, it was on this idea that Hezbollah could flatten northern Israel easily, and it just doesn't seem to be true.
So how confident are you in the current Israeli strategy as working towards Israel's best interests?
I think it's good for now because I think they had no other choice. And I think that, as like, obviously I have Israeli citizenship, so I can't say like only like I don't have an interest. But as an American, like, I can sit there and say, yes, this is so great. Like, they're winning. They're finally going to like become more self-sufficient, whatever it may be. But the problem really is the longer this goes, the more their economy is just going to become devastated in terms of like foreign investment, in terms of being able to sell products overseas, just because shipping is halted to an extent. So I worry that if this goes on forever, that it'll hinder their ability to maintain an economic, kind of superiority in the region, or even be economically viable for a very long time if they keep spending money like they are without boosting their economy or being able to boost their economy. But in terms of militarily, I think that the only thing stopping them from going even further than they have now is international pressure. And I think that Bibi is caring less and less and less about it, because it's one thing when people pay you the lip service, when they say Israel's right to defend itself, we support him no matter what, blah, 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 blah. But when like even half your allies start like, oh, you're a warmonger, or we're thinking about this, like, we don't like Joe Biden openly says how much he hates him, so I think Bibi just says, okay, well, if they're going to all call me this, I get the ability to actually kind of act like it a little bit. So I don't see the international pressure being the same as it was a year ago.
And who do you think is going to win the American presidential election, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
I honestly don't know. And the reason being is that my biggest fear is if the election stays close enough for them to cheat, I think they will. And I worry about that because regardless of how much you hate polls or anybody hates polls, they're all neck and neck basically everywhere. And we know that Trump defeated Hillary by just like a handful of votes in a few swing states, and Biden did the same to Trump. So could it happen? Yes. Do I hope it doesn't? Of course. But I think that right now, unless something big happens between now and November, it's as much of a toss-up as any other election we've ever seen.
And what would it mean for Israel, a Kamala Harris presidency versus a Donald Trump presidency?
I just think that Kamala Harris is the embodiment of everything that's wrong with our society in general. Like, there's a reason why she's running a campaign where she doesn't stand for anything, because there's no reason why she has to. Because people will just like if someone on Twitter tomorrow said, "Oh, the reason that Kamala Harris is being quiet is because she's truly a Nobel laureate and she doesn't want to come off as too smart," you would see half of Twitter writing the next day like, "Oh, didn't you know? Like, she's actually a 170 IQ and she's just dumbing it down for the masses because she doesn't want to come off as like a professor." And they would honestly believe this and not know why other people don't believe this. So I think that she just embodies mediocrity. And I think at a time where we have so many issues in this country, mediocrity is not going to do much good.
How serious a problem is it for Israel, the amount of international opprobrium it's building?
I don't think it matters at all, to tell you the truth, because I don't think most of these countries were very friendly to them in the first place. So anyone who's like, if anything, anyone who's causing problems for them right now, whether it be with like France and arms embargoes and all of that, Israel doesn't really get much from any of them. So it's performative. It doesn't mean anything. And I don't see a scenario where Israel becomes so like I don't see them turning South Africa, where they get sanctioned by half the world and they're unable to conduct commerce or anything like that. I just don't see it. Maybe, I mean, always could happen. I just don't see it.
Is there someone you'd rather see as Israel's prime minister aside from Bibi Netanyahu?
I can't say that I do, because I don't think anyone's risen up that could do the job. Like, I think that's probably by design. I'm sure Bibi had a lot to do with that, but I think that there's no one really ready to take the reins tomorrow. I think there's probably people on the like, but I don't think it's acceptable at all by the general population.
And what do you think of the relative low intensity of the anti-Israel rallies on American college campuses over the past couple of weeks? I would have expected it to be much more intense. And so this makes me think that this whole anti-Israel, pro-Palestine series of protests were top-down, directed, possibly funded significantly by Iran. And now that Iran and Democratic Party activists see that these rallies are bad for the election of Kamala Harris, that they've dialed them way back. What's your perspective? We've lost Halsey English, so hope to get him back
getting
soon.
it onto the censorship. So I'm not sure when I've seen a better debate. Maybe, I don't know. I have no use for him, obviously, because my politics are opposite, but maybe Barack Obama at his height in 2008. But this was just an extraordinary performance, a stellar performance. I'm not surprised that he was great because we've kind of seen it out on the campaign trail and in various interviews with hostile interviewers. But I was a little surprised at how pathetic Tim Walz was. Came out of the gate nervous, hemming and hawing. And then just the way he looked when he wasn't speaking on camera, he looked nervous, he looked sad, he looked befuddled. He kind of looked like the kid in the back of the classroom that can't keep up with the lecture.
Halsey English back. Halsey,
I'm sorry, man. I get the crappiest reception where I work.
Okay.
And
I understand. What do you think of the relative low intensity of the anti-Israel protests on American college campuses over the past couple of weeks?
It's two things. One, yes, the funding is drying up. I mean, most of it was funded by Soros. and he'll continue to fund it if there's like people to fund it. But I think Iran and all them were also funding it, and with everything going on, I don't think that they're able to fund it as much. But the real reason is for the same reason you don't see people with Ukraine flags outside their house really anymore, or people wearing masks, except for like the assorted lunatics, because it's just done. Like, people don't have this attention span anymore, which is why you're seeing pro-Palestinians crying a lot on social media a lot, because our attention span only seems to last a few years. Like, remember when masks were, you were killing your neighbor if you didn't wear one,
Yeah.
and then if you didn't take the vaccine, you wanted everyone to die, and then if you didn't support Ukraine, you were anti-democracy, and then the next one, the next one, and the next one. I think the pro-Palestinian thing was like cute for a minute, but now it's not doing anything for anyone anymore. The only people that care are the people that cared before 10/7. I think most of the people that cared afterwards, they just went on to whatever the next thing is, which is probably the election.
What do you think of the trajectory of Tucker Carlson, where he was boosting and promoting a popular historian, Daryl Cooper, a podcast historian who verged on Nazi apologetics?
I don't. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead.
A bit.
Go ahead.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yes.
So
Go ahead.
I don't understand like Tucker's thing. I mean, obviously it's Arab money, because he's getting a whole ton of money from Qatar, from a Qatari businessman for all this, which is kind of sad. But I don't think Tucker has ever been like what's the word I'm looking for? Like, he's never been a principled person. I think Tucker is an entertainer, just like most other newscasters. And I think that Tucker's whole thing has always been like being a bit edgy and all of that. But I don't think he researched this guy before he came on. I don't think he did at all, which is also why he didn't really stand up for him after like the guy came on and Tucker said once or twice, like, oh, this is the historian everyone wants to ban. And then it was over. Like, I don't think Tucker cares. I don't think he even knows what this guy really stands for. He just knows to bring him on and kiss his ass a little bit so that the guy will say edgy things and get him views. Like, I don't think Tucker actually believes any of that. I don't think Tucker cares even slightly what the guy said. But the guy turned out to be a complete retard.
Do you think that Tucker is anti-Semitic?
No, I just think he knows that his audience is.
Yeah, I think it's much more Tucker's
when Tucker
audience capture.
When Tucker was on Fox News, right, his audience was primarily boomers, like older people that were Fox News supporters, evangelical Christians who were all hardcore pro-Israel. So he didn't have to address the topic at all. And even if he did and came out with like something anti-Israel or whatever, nobody cared at all, because they just said, oh, boomers are not following podcast or whatever you think.
Okay,
So
Halsey, the
entire
connection's
audience had
just too bad.
I'm quite sure.
I'm sorry, Halsey, the connection's just too bad.
Do it another time then.
Yeah, let's do it another time. Great to talk to you, bro. Take care,
We'll do it
man.
another time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yep, no worries. Okay. Claire, I welcome you back to the show. Anything that you've heard that you want to comment on, Claire Khaw?
Thank you. I can't. It's all hearsay, and I mean, what can you say except that there's probably some truth in some of the things, but we'll never be able to prove it conclusively. And basically, Israel is meant to be there to fight the Arabs and justify American presence in Israel. And I know a lot of people want to blame Jews, but I think a lot of Jews are just put there in order to fight Arabs, in order to justify American presence in Israel. But they're just as much the pawns of the American empire as are Gentiles.
And what do you think about the idea that you can often detect somebody's political leanings just from looking at them?
Well, obviously, somebody's behavior will be dictated in a large part to sex, class, religion, culture. So, all these factors make up what will cause people to behave in a certain way. And I think race is a red herring, and it is class, religion, and sex that is crucial in understanding the most important divisions that divide us all.
And how much free will do you think we have?
My answer is that we all have free will, except some of us will never think of using it. In theory, we all have it.
Okay.
But some people would rather die.
Mm-hmm. So do you think people have a genetic predisposition towards certain politics?
Well, I think men would be tempted to it's actually in their interest. If men want to retain power in society, they would have to do so as members of a patriarchy, and it's only when they go over to matriarchy that they find that they have no control and no stake in society at all, because really the patriarchy is a breeding program for married parents and their legitimate offspring. But we now have the opposite, which is unmarried parents and their illegitimate offspring who are very difficult to reason and bargain with.
Many men in relationships take on the female frame because they have a difficulty thinking beyond their sexual desires. And so women are usually more sophisticated and thoughtful and coherent in developing a frame for a relationship, and then men will either get hooked into a woman and so essentially accept her frame, and then there are a few men who have enough strength and clarity to maintain their own frame while beguiled or intoxicated by a woman. Do you think I'm right that men tend to, by lack of courage, simply assent to the frame that their female partner puts on their relationship?
Well, men need to know where the boundaries are, and they need to be told. The closest thing to being told what the moral boundaries are would be to have principles that come from morality, that come from religion, and all this is not currently very clear to people. So the joke is that men can never say no to an immoral woman offering him no-string sex. They just can't say no. They are incapable of rejecting that option. And therefore, their society is corrupted.
I notice that many women have the same level of visceral repulsion about weak men that many men have towards obese women. That there is just a sense of visceral repulsion I notice in many women with regard to weak men. And what I mean by weakness, men who are afraid of speaking honestly with women, men who are afraid to establish their own frame in the relationship, men who are afraid to speak back to their woman and not simply keep quiet and bow to her emotional whims.
Well, that's because the boundaries are not clear, and it's not clear for men, what power they really have. They're told in theory that, they can do all sorts of things, but in reality, in the divorce and family courts, they might find that, if only they kept their mouth shut, they could have not been divorced. But fundamentally, it's up to the men to change the rules. And that's it, really. You know, if you don't like the rules, men, you have to somehow get it together to engage in focused political activity to get the rules changed. That's the only solution, in my view.
Well, what's your attitude towards the recreational use of marijuana?
I'm minded to be indulgent towards it.
Why?
Because I find it, well, I'll admit that I've been, occasionally indulged in it, and I suppose I don't see. The thing is, what is the harm? So we can think of alcohol. It's legal, but obviously we shouldn't drink too much and become alcoholics. And it's all a way of knowing our limits. And if we're put into temptation, maybe many of us cannot resist it. And that's why you have all these rules saying never touch alcohol, etc. But I think on the whole,
what about the large number of, I notice there's a large number of people who start smoking marijuana become losers, particularly men, and half the time it seems to be a gateway drug into harder drugs.
yes, Peter Hitchens is very firm about that, and possibly he may be right. So, on the one hand, I would want. I think people are fundamentally conflicted. On the one hand, they want stable marriage, prepared to make the sacrifice needed to, bring about a society whose rule system and social mores expect, people to respect their marriage vows. So we're always in this, let's do a little bit of this, do a little bit of that, and we contradict ourselves. We send mixed messages which show that we're not serious, and nobody takes us seriously. And I think that's a problem.
Okay, was there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
No, that's
okay.
it. Thank you, Luke.
Talk to you later. So let's just play a little bit here from October 11, Mark Halperin
That's
show.
the point of the event. Washington Post is reporting that the Trump campaign is dealing with the Secret Service, and they're saying that he's going to do a lot more events in the next few weeks. And here's the first paragraph. Donald Trump's campaign requested military aircraft for Trump to fly in during the final weeks of the campaign, expanded flight restrictions over his residences and rallies, ballistic glass pre-positioned in 7 battleground states for the campaign's use, and an array of military vehicles to transport Trump, according to emails reviewed by the Washington Post. So, if we didn't live in a polarized, Trumpized world, I think it's pretty obvious, given that it's 2 people who tried to kill him and that the Iranians seem to be trying to kill him, and that we don't know the motives of the 2 people who tried. It seems pretty obvious to me that Congress and whoever was president, regardless of the parties, would make these would fulfill these requests, because it would be not just a personal tragedy and a human tragedy if he were killed, but imagine how divided the country would be. These requests, I can't tell you if they're excessive substantively. I just don't know enough about how much it would cost, etc. But they don't seem unreasonable. And certainly, if you think it's of American value, regardless if it's Trump or someone else, that one of the major party nominees be allowed to campaign as much as he wants in safety, these seem like reasonable requests to me. But the story in the Washington Post suggests that the administration is not saying immediately, yes, we're going to do these things. Keep watching this, because his safety is at issue, but it's always his capacity to campaign. And as nice as his private plane is, it's just not the same. And we know that already there have been Trump events that have been canceled or postponed because of safety considerations. So I think, and again, I try to take out who the candidate is. And if you've got Trump Transition syndrome, you probably think, no, of course he shouldn't get special treatment. And make no mistake, this would be special treatment. But without a doubt, this is something that is going to be treated this will be treated in a way, unfortunately, that will reflect the bitter partisanship and Trump derangement syndrome. These seem like requests that if he thinks he needs these to be able to reach voters and campaign, it seems to me that they should take this quite seriously. Okay, if you're talk to Democrats, including Harris Democrats, and say, why do you think you're going to win this? They'll talk about abortion. They'll talk about the polls being wrong in 2022. They'll talk about the gender gap and more. They'll win with women and more women vote than men. They'll talk about the ground game, and the ground game is they'll talk about money as well, right? They have a huge financial advantage. My view was originally when it was Biden,
really want to turn my dad into a progressive liberal that
6 years after his death, he's now just the most liberal progressive that ever existed when he's one of the most conservative senators in American modern history. I think it's because he's still so popular in Arizona even now, and there's data and polling and research that's been done by polling institutes and the McCain Institute that shows that around 14% people in Arizona who are Republicans consider themselves McCain Republicans. So I'm sure that's what she's going for, and those are people who are obviously not Trumpers. I think it's getting to the point of being disrespectful the way everyone is talking about him, because I find so much of it it just doesn't sound like him. And we were obviously incredibly close, and I worked with him both professionally and, you know, we were very close personally, and it's hard. I don't like it. And I remember what he actually said about Vice President Harris in private. I actually was like remembering a specific dinner party was something he said, which I don't want to be disrespectful or uncouth and share it right here, but like it just sounds like not real to me.
I'll ask you a question about it. You can pass, of course. Is what she said in characterizing what she claimed was a conversation with your dad that he said you make a great senator, is that consistent with your sense of what he thought of her?
No, not at all. And there's one thing in particular. There's one dinner that I was at with him and some other politicians. I can remember very specifically something he said about her. And again, I don't want to like get into some kind of match with the Harris campaign, but I just like, he was not a Democrat. He was so far from it. And her stance on Israel alone would.
Alex is a Republican, as everybody knows, but I want to ask you a question. Right now, what would you say is the core negative frame of the Harris campaign on Donald Trump? What is their intended negative frame?
I'm confused by it. I see too many attacks and not focus on their campaign. Is it he's the death of democracy? Is it, I mean, I'd say, in fact, it's abortion. That's the only thing that's been consistent throughout.
All right, what if this is their negative frame? We're not going back to everything bad about Donald Trump. Abortion, chaos, January 6th, divisiveness. That to me is their negative frame. Assuming I'm charitably cleaning up the chaos in their messaging, is that a good negative frame?
If she had a positive campaign that worked, I think that's a very good campaign for them. I think that's their best shot.
Yeah. And you talked a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
I think their failure is not on what they've said about Trump, even though they have been, to me, too scattered and not enough focused on the we're not going back and here's why. It's that they haven't defined her.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about defining her, and I want you to address that. But I want you to first talk about the Trump negative frame on her. And you early on said it eventually drifts back to liberal, right? Do I have that right?
I think mostly, but liberal is step one. Step two is liberal and lying about it. Therefore, she's inauthentic. We don't know who she is.
Right. Right. So chameleon, fake, cipher. Right. So their thing continues to be, I believe, weak, failed, dangerously liberal. Right. Is that, I continue to believe that's only 4 words, but it may be 2 words too many. Which is Trump's best frame now? Not which one's he doing, but which is his best in your view? Or is it chameleon?
I think I think they've done enough of the liberal that, to me, it's she's sold her soul. She's nothing at all. Because it's what I believe since the start of this thing, and I'm sticking to it, is that voters grow more risk averse as you get closer to the election, and whom you date and love and have fun with is not necessarily who you marry. A lot of voters, I agree with Lewis that the frame about the future is what America's all about. Lift my eyes over the horizon, take me to a better place. And she is doing that better than Trump. But when over half of the population thinks the country's on the wrong track, when people are bleeding to death on the sidewalk, it's hard to sell them the future. Stop it now. Don't hurt me anymore. And that's, to me, sets up the Trump attack on her, which is she's no one at all. She's whomever she needs to be at this moment. She's never explained this evolution. And who is she? She is the crazy left around her. She can't be trusted with the most important job, with your future.
Right. Again, if you want to be in the conference, calls you and he says, Alex, my pollster Tony Fabrizio, my strategist Chris Lasavita, my campaign chief Susie Wiles, they're all telling me it's going great. Everything seems to be great. I need you to, Alex, tell me, what should I be worried about? What might we not be considering? What would you tell President Trump?
I wouldn't answer the phone, but if I did,
he's got his caller ID says Fidel Castro, so you pick up.
I would say that you're making progress, but with a lot of low propensity voters. You're beginning to get some young black men. They're going to show up. Okay, good luck. You're beginning to make progress with Hispanics. Okay, not the highest propensity voters. You're rearranging the electorate. And remember, your ceiling may have bumped up. You have a higher ceiling now, apparently, than you've had before. You've expanded who you are, Elon Musk. And again, you've expanded the perception, not necessarily the machines bringing in more votes with RFK Jr., but you still have a ceiling. And right now you're enjoying a surge of momentum, but when you stand up, you still hit your head on a ceiling, and it's going to be very close. And remember this, Donald Trump, they've got a machine that might be worth 2 or 3 points in Pennsylvania that you don't have.
Okay, so what would you tell him? So if he said, Alex, what can I do about that? What would you tell him? I know that's not your area of expertise. Too late.
It's too late to build a machine. Therefore, he has to help her disqualify herself. And that is putting on a bunch of ads and a bunch of events, which is what they're doing. Here's one Kamala Harris, here's another Kamala Harris, frick, frack, border, border, and then close it like this with 2 words.
Yeah.
Had enough. Empower voters to make the change. That's the tag I would use to close the campaign. White letters on a blackboard after we see a bunch of Kamala, either flip-flopping or her vacuousness, her inability to complete a thought. And, you know, some of it ought to be on foreign policy because the world is on fire, but some of it is a crisis at home. It doesn't matter where that is. And then right after the had enough, a nice quiet board that says Trump Vance, because I don't want to focus the choice, voters' choice on them. I want to make it about had enough about her.
Right. So you put the I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message at the top of the ad to avoid it ruining your ending.
I would say at the end, just put up a nice board. Yeah, the less of them, the better.
Yeah. I'll point out that the guy who's made millions of dollars making and selling ads suggests it's too late to put money in the field, make more ads.
It's always too late. Yes, that's true.
I'm going to read.
It's important to a very significant portion of women, not all women, obviously. When it comes to Title IX, that polls extremely well with the suburban mom vote, the soccer mom vote that Alex coined the term for decades ago, but now we prefer suburban moms over soccer moms. That's because I fit that demographic. It polls extremely well in the sense that women are very worried and concerned about their daughters and playing in sports. I think Democrats really got out over their skis thinking that, that this huge culture war issue would be a big winner for them and that all people sort of feel the way people in Los Angeles and Manhattan do, and it's just not the case. A lot of people do it quietly, or they don't want to talk about it in public, but they will vote very differently. In my state, Glenn Youngkin ran on it, Governor Glenn Youngkin, and won handily.
Okay, let's get a little bit more from a different Mark Halperin show this past week.
Get me the light,
Spicer.
Right? So I say that because she's got to figure out it's a weird role for her to navigate at this stage. She needs to overcompensate and do things even though she really doesn't have a role because it's more about appearance and perception.
And look, Florida is also going to be hard because DeSantis is hyper political. I mean, you can see this going sideways very quickly.
Yeah. So the Trump campaign has tried to define Kamala Harris as weak, failed, dangerously liberal. And I think the real danger for her right now, because of what's happening in North Carolina and Georgia, is I think most of us thought the focus would be on dangerously liberal. But this threatens to put in sharp relief weak and failed and tying her to the Biden record, right? This can't, whether they started this before the storms or not, I'm still trying to piece together, but tying her to the Biden record with the reality that both storms are so immense, and we'll hope for minimal damage, obviously, for the new one, but they're so immense that the best FEMA in the world couldn't satisfy the people on the ground. And while the national media has downplayed that, the social media, egged on by Donald Trump and his allies, saying it's a failed effort. That's politics. The disinformation and lies is unfortunate, but I don't know that people could expect anything different from any campaign at this phase. I really think she's in danger of trying to figure out how to not look weak and failed in reaction to these storms. It's just a reality of the situation. She's doing all this media. She did 60 Minutes last night. She's just trying to get through these interviews, right? She wasn't trying to, there's no soundbite. There's no offensive soundbite. It's just don't screw up. And Whitaker was very firm in asking with a great tone. I thought he did a fantastic job of asking good questions and follow-ups. And her answers, if you're a Harris fan, you could say her answers were fine. But most people I know thought her answers were, she didn't have a Lester Holt moment, but they didn't produce anything positive. The coverage of it is minimal. And I don't know how big the audience was. So today she's got 3 big audiences. And so, Sean, here's my question. How do you define success? If you're the Harris campaign and you want to make the case 60 Minutes was successful, successful is influencing people in Green Bay. We can't measure. We can't know how undecided voters in Green Bay experienced it. So how do you know if that was a success? And how will she know if The View and Howard and Colbert are successes?
Well, so I think there's a different metric. So first of all, I just want to say this from a guy who pretty much has nothing positive to say about legacy media. I thought Bill Whitaker did a phenomenal job last night. I've seen him in a lot of interviews, and so credit where credit is due. He man, that guy came with his A game. He asked I thought the questions were good. They backed up. I mean, like, anyway, just if you haven't seen it, he should. You do a really great job of discerning what a good question is and how to get someone to respond. And last night, I thought he did that.
I agree.
Secondly, I think you're right. I felt like even the most basic answers, she kind of was pivoting all over the place. Same thing with Tim Walz, by the way. Nothing good out of that. There's a difference with the podcasts and the shows. The metric of success, like, so for Howard Stern and The View, like, you're catering to your own audience where you're trying to get across the personal side of yourself, that you're a fun person, you go outside and have time with your family, you reassure them in the personal qualities that people want to see, that whole existential question of who would you like to have a beer with. So I think the metric of success for an interview like that is a little different from a success of a 60 Minutes interview, which you touched on a few weeks ago, which is when you wake up, are there headlines either promoting what you said, saying Harris outlines economic policy, Harris outlines this, or Harris eviscerates Donald Trump. You got neither of those from 60 Minutes. So that to me was not a success. The metric of success on these other things is, do people come across saying, wow, I didn't know that about her, I liked her. Like when I watched the Theo Von podcast with Donald Trump, a couple of the other, I was like, wow, he comes across, he allowed people a little window into who he was as a person that I enjoyed watching. I think those moved the needle forward. So those are sort of my metrics of success. I don't think 60 Minutes was, and we'll see. I also think the Stern one is not, I would not have chosen that one if I were her. I get the View, the other ones, those are smart. They play to a gender gap that's huge, and where she has a great issue to really press on abortion. Howard Stern, I think, if I were her team, I'm going to be holding my breath, crossing my fingers.
No. You need, if you haven't, go listen to his interview with Joe Biden and his recent interviews with Hillary Clinton. That'll be easier than the View interview.
Okay.
I'm telling you, that's what Howard has become in interviewing Democrats. It's quite something. So I see in the chat, which I don't normally look at, but a few things caught my eye. We're talking about Harris a lot on this program for a couple reasons. Okay. We know what Trump is. We don't need to spend every episode talking about January 6th. We'll talk about it if people want to bring it up. What's happening now with Kamala Harris is, this is an experiment. Can you win a short campaign with an untested candidate? And what I'm telling you is happening in private polling is she's got a problem now. Okay. It's not cheering for Trump. It's not predicting Trump will win. She's got a problem. Please bring up the New York Times poll. So new New York Times poll shows her up 3 nationally. We all know that 3 is like the bubble point, right? If she's up 3, she's got a chance to win the electoral college, but they'd rather be at 4 and they don't want to be at 2. So 3 is right at the bubble. I'm not saying this Times poll is right. It's in line with other national polls. Now bring up 102. Wall Street Journal has a story about Democrats really worried about the 3 Rust Belt states. We all know from our contacts in both campaigns that Pennsylvania is tough for her right now. And without Pennsylvania, there are paths, but there aren't many. There's no path without Wisconsin. So you see here, Tammy Baldwin's Senate campaign poll shows Harris down 3 in Wisconsin. We all said yesterday, Wisconsin and Michigan are looking worse for Harris than before. Baldwin has her down 3. Not Baldwin has Harris down 3. Why is the Baldwin campaign sharing its polling with the Wall Street Journal? Good question. Sean, why would a campaign share their polling negative for their candidate? Because they want more visits? Is that the reason?
I mean, I think part of this is like a Hillary Clinton redux, which is that you want to make sure people understand what's going on. Plus, you're tied to it. Tammy Baldwin can't win if Kamala Harris loses.
She can. Yeah, she can. She can.
Okay. Well,
in a close race, she can.
Okay, maybe it's not a 5,000 vote squeaker, but I think part of this is to make sure that they understand this. But I will say this. Off top, Alyssa Slotkin said the same thing last week in Michigan. Like, this is what I was talking about the other day.
Correct.
They are sending.
I think that's the challenge for Democrats is the trend lines, right? I mean, if you just go back now for the last 3 to 4 weeks in Michigan and in Wisconsin, not that Harris was up, 7 and it went down to 4, down.
Okay, if you just looked at this man, right, wouldn't you automatically expect that he's on the left? Is this not the classic physiognomy of a liberal commentator?
To 1. It's gone from 3 to 2 to 1 to tied. And at the same time, those Senate candidates, Casey, Slotkin, and Baldwin, are seeing the same
all much closer.
Right. By the way, so you do it to sound the alarm bell. You are sounding
right, and you just have to look at Sean Spicer, and you'd expect this man's on the right.
The alarm bell in the party.
Yeah, Mark, Dan's right, but just a little asterisk point. I don't want to go on this, but I think it was funny. A week ago, you had Chuck Schumer and the D-Trip kind of, or the DSCC pivot and say, we're going to bail on Montana and go after Texas and Florida on offense. And here they are 7 days later going, oh, crap. I mean, I just get a kick out of this because after November 5th, we may look back and say, wow, that was a horrible mistake not to fortify the trenches.
I think that move by Schumer was all designed to prevent people from throwing the towel in at the DSCC and all shifting to CCC.
I know.
And lobbyists reaching just to Republicans. They have to pretend they can win the majority. They have to have a path to talk through. For you Harris people on here complaining that we're talking about problems in the Harris campaign, you're welcome to put your head in the sand about it. If you want to go watch MSNBC primetime and hear how great things are going for the Harris campaign, you're welcome to do that. But if you want to understand what's actually happening, we're here to tell you. I just saw some new private polling today. That's very robust private polling. She's in a lot of trouble. Here's how I framed it this morning in my newsletter. The conversation I'm having with Trump people and Democrats with data are extremely bullish on Trump's chances in the last 48 hours. Extremely bullish. You think of the 7 battleground states. Which ones is Harris in danger of losing? I would say Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. I'm not saying she'll lose all 6, but she's in danger. The only one that the Democrats say she's not in danger of losing is the one I never say the name of because I can't pronounce it, but it's where Las Vegas is, right? You guys agree with me? She could lose any of those 6. Right? I mean, she could lose all 7, but Democrats will tell you they're worried about those 6. They're less worried about the 7th. Yeah. I don't know any Trump person who says they're worried about losing any of the 7. They don't know that they don't necessarily think they're the favorite in Michigan and Wisconsin, but they're not worried about losing it. Right. There's not, you don't hear from them, oh my goodness. What you hear is we're moving up. What the 3 of us are hearing, we're moving up in those 2. We're going to win. We're going to win the 3 Sunbelt states, and we're stronger in Pennsylvania than she is. That to me, if the whole thing's about the Electoral College, you take any of the Rust Belt states away from her, it's very difficult for her to win. Very difficult. It's not mathematically impossible, but it probably won't happen if she loses any of them. So now, but she can replace Pennsylvania with either Georgia, North Carolina, and then one other of the Sunbelt states. Nevada. Yep. Well, any of them. If she wins, if she loses Pennsylvania and she wins either Georgia or North Carolina, then she just needs one of the other 3, and that's not impossible. But what I'm telling you today is things are not moving right for her. And if you think today's interviews are going to fix it, then you're optimistic about her performance in interviews, where her best interviews are where nothing horrible happens. She's not driving the message. Now, speaking of message, Harris campaign puts out ads every day, it seems, and lots of them, which is good because you can A/B test them and you can try to target them to particular people. But it does raise the question. We know the Trump campaign has 4 words to describe their negative frame on Harris, which, as I said before, might be too many. But we're going to look at 2 Harris ads that are different messages. And I want to talk to you about, what do you guys think at the back half of the 2 ads? What do you think the Harris frame is, primary frame on Trump? Is it we're not going back? Is that specific enough? We'll talk about it. Raise your hand if you want to get in, because here's my question. What is the Harris message? Is it Trump is going to take away your health care? Is it he will take us back? Like, if the Trump message is 4 words, which is failed, weak, failed, dangerously liberal. Dan, say you were doing your best job to explain this. What is her main negative frame on Trump?
It's that we're not going backwards. And that is it, because they believe that people have connotation. everyone knows Trump. Everyone has an opinion.
But we're not going backwards. We're not going backwards on what? Because his economic policy, some people like. We're not going backwards on January 6th, on chaos. What are we not going backwards on?
I think, Mark,
say what you say, either or both. What are they trying to convey, or what should they convey? What aren't we going back to? Chaos?
Well, those are 2, right. And that is the challenge you just hit, which is that to the voters who are undecided, they liked the Trump economy. They felt he kept us safe. So when she keeps saying we're not going backwards, I'm not sure exactly who they're trying to persuade. Now they're introducing healthcare. That is an interesting thing, because it's not resonating as the top of mind for voters. I don't think people view their healthcare as under threat right now, right? So it may be that Trump, who did try to take it away the first time and was not successful, and now is claiming like nothing to see here. But I'm not sure necessarily what that, who they're trying to motivate with that message. But that is it, Mark. Backwards is just, you have a negative image of Trump. And Democrats for 4 years have said to themselves, 50.1% will never vote for this guy again. Biden believed it, and it appears that's what Harris is riding down the home stretch. And
I'll just make one. So let me just make one point. When the Biden people said in 21, we pray Trump runs, we pray Trump is a nominee, because no one who voted for Biden in 20 is going to vote for Trump in 24. I said, really, no one? And it was like, find me one. And now you can walk out your door in any city in America and find people who voted for Biden in 20 who are going to vote for Trump. So
100%,
so not
that these ads whiff and that she is struggling. But for all the people who say, like, David Axelrod came out, James Carville has come out, Gretchen Whitmer has come out. Like, there are more and more Democrats saying something needs to change. And Bill Clinton and Barack Obama were very, very aggressive when they had a negative to jump on it and confront it. And I think what's maddening to a lot of Democrats is they see the problems, and the Harris campaign waves them off and just says, we're going straight forward.
Mark, one thing that's really interesting, we talk about ads and messages. Just because I'm a political dork, last night I pulled out this review of what they called the CAVE, the Obama Data and Analytics Analysis from 2012. And I was reading through it because we had studied it very, very closely about how well they really used data and analytics in the 12 Obama race to really fine tune the message, to tweak things. I mean, it was literally a college course in the making of how well to do things, right? And I feel like, and part of the end of the presentation was, okay, what is the next evolution? Because too many times Republicans are fighting the last battle. And I think about it in the context now, 2024, over 10 years later, and the Harris campaign has moved backwards. Like, this should have been a data-driven, like, this is moving the needle with these people because of this. And I'm surprised at how well Obama had done with the use of data and analytics in 12, that we've 12 years later not gotten to the point where they could literally tell you this ad plays with these people and moves this demographic in this way. It just,
well, just to be, I hear what you're saying, but just to be fair, that they're doing more of that than you see, because this campaign, like the Biden campaign, they don't leak. You don't have their data analytics people out there doing interviews about how brilliant they are. They're just quietly doing the work, but they also haven't figured it out yet because they're running 17 different messages. But they're trying. They're trying. Phoebe, could you unmute? Could you unmute?
Yeah.
There you go. Tell folks who don't know where you are.
Okay, let me get a little bit more analysis here. Come on.
And is extremely popular here. So those two factors are important. I believe the Trump campaign is talking a lot about Title IX. I believe there were ads recently about it because it is a winning issue. So I agree with you. But the abortion question, it's that question. If this is going to turn for her, it will be because of that. I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree. David, thank you. Come back off. Appreciate it. Sue, I don't want to get overly personal, but I believe you're a white college educated woman. Am I right?
White, overly college.
Okay, a lot of highlights in this show.
This interview is like, but they continue to make this faithful choice to spend most of their time now reaching audiences they need to reach. They're absolutely right that the percentage of viewers of shows like that, like these lighter shows of undecided voters, the percentage is almost certainly higher than it would be on a news program. But this question of whether she's passed the basic test that people think she needs to pass, that's not a creation of me. It's not a creation of the media. It's not a creation of Republicans. It's out of the mouths of a lot of undecided voters you've heard from on this platform that show up in focus groups. And again, she continues to make a faithful choice as the clock ticks down to spend her time doing what will be lighter interviews where there will be some serious questions, but not the kind that are going to elicit what many people say they want to hear. Two, on the race overall, I can't tell you how many people I heard today about the betting markets. We've been trying to book some guests to talk about the betting markets and defend them because I'm just a huge critic of them. I don't understand why people pay attention to them. The betting markets are, I'll tell you is this. There are lots of Republicans, say lots, a not insignificant number of Republicans who say the race is effectively over. That, as I reported a month ago, that Trump is going to lock up the Sun Belt states, probably all four, but at least three, and that he's going to win Pennsylvania, and that checkmates her. They may be wrong, but there's not an insignificant number of them who are quite confident of that. And the data they've seen on the absentees and the early votes and the voter registration, I should include that too, makes them more confident. I don't know a single Democrat who thinks that nationally about the Electoral College. I know some who think it about individual battleground states, but I haven't talked to, and I'm sure they exist, but I haven't talked to them yet. Democrats who are equally confident. That doesn't mean Harris is going to lose, but it is an asymmetry in my reporting that comes from a variety of people connected to the campaigns and not connected to the campaigns. I don't know where that means we're headed. I do know, again, that we've had very much polling in the last week, and what we've had has not been that good. It's not been either robust or very informative. And I continue to urge everybody, you see a 400-person poll and the likely voter screen doesn't seem clear, shouldn't let it affect your day. We're looking for big, robust polls by pollsters who know what they're doing. The New York Times teased this morning that they're about to publish their poll that's going to have data on a few states and nationally and a focus on Hispanic and Black voters. There's no doubt that Kamala Harris continues to have a problem with young Black and Hispanic men as compared to Joe Biden. Could she win if her numbers are worse than Biden there? Sure, she makes it up elsewhere, including with women. But it remains the case that both these candidates have ceilings of something below where they would need to be confident of the victory. And what the Republicans are now saying is, on the trajectory she's on, Harris's ceiling is lower than Trump's. Again, they may be wrong, but that's where they have confidence. And that's why they're somewhat confused by her doing what she's doing. They don't think that's going to expand where she is. All right.
I suspect what the Biden team was thinking was they were trying to put in public pressure on Netanyahu on that side. I mean, they know that they can't really pressure Hamas publicly because Hamas will do whatever it wants to do. But I think the idea probably was to build this kind of momentum and box the Israeli government into a ceasefire. They said, oh, it's almost done there. You don't want to be seen to be backing out of it because then international opinion will certainly blame you for no ceasefire. I think where they, if you could call it a miscalculation, is that I don't think Netanyahu really cares about that. He's going to do what he wants to do, and he doesn't particularly do what Biden says. So I don't know that I'd call it a mistake, but I don't really know how else Biden could have played it either. He has to be showing the American people and the world that he's trying. And if he stayed silent for a year and didn't announce it, I wonder if he'd get even stronger calls about what.
Keep talking.
I was going to say that this makes Trump the only person on the planet to have touched the glowing orb in Saudi Arabia and the tomb of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So he either now has been invested with untold magical powers that we do not understand, or something terrible is going to, or he has overexposed himself to the mysteries of the universe, and will not survive these dual encounters with the holiness of Judaism and Islam at once. We still have no idea what that golden orb in Saudi Arabia was. Meanwhile, of course, 5 hours later, Kamala Harris plants a pomegranate tree on the grounds of the Naval Observatory, where the vice president's house is, claiming that the pomegranate is a symbol of hope and righteousness in Judaism. It's not exactly what a pomegranate is. The pomegranate is considered notable because there is a myth that the pomegranate contains 613 seeds, which corresponds to the number of laws that Jews are supposed to obey, as laid out in the 5 books of Moses. Other thing, sounded like she was reading it phonetically, like she doesn't speak English natively. And you know how sometimes actresses in the 40s and 50s movies who were imported from Europe would have to recite American dialogue, and you would hear that they had sort of learned it the way I speak Hebrew, for example, phonetically. So I think that sort of undercut whatever power her speech may have had. I think, just by the way, and finally to answer what you two guys are saying, which is so interesting, I think basically what's happened over the last month is that Israel, having spent a year trying to, or most of a year, trying to figure out how to satisfy America's very inconstant back and forth advice, our domestic political problems, wanting to remain close to Biden, wanting not to push too many buttons and all of that, around about July, basically Bibi Netanyahu and himself and then his cabinet, even though they're incredibly delicate about it, basically decided that they had to go forward with a plan of their own to complete the war in Gaza, and then found, for complex reasons, that the war against Hezbollah in the north had to start because their intelligence capabilities were about to be exposed. So they needed to use them or lose them. And so this probably started a little earlier than we expected. But we have here is an incapacitated president whose advice is not very helpful, and a candidate for president in the Democratic Party who wants to say as little as possible and not offend anybody on any side. And the Israelis simply have to go forward on their own path, because there is no path for them to follow. America is charting no path. America has no path. America has no advice. America has no policy. Its policy is a two-state solution, which is like my saying that, my policy is that I should lose 100 pounds by tomorrow morning. So that
some of you people know I've been covering the protests pretty religiously since 2019, including deeply in Portland, Oregon. Attended them for months and months. And at that time, they're young people and they're full of passion. And, it was kind of interesting to me. Like, why are they doing this? How are they going about it? Yes, it's very violent, but also one-on-one is kind of interesting. I was at the DNC recently reporting for Reason, and there really seemed to be a lassitude. There seemed to be this sort of protester fatigue because, the rage calories they need, whether it's going to be from George Floyd or Roe v. Wade or now, Palestine and Israel, it's just like they've been doing it for 10 months. They're kind of not really getting anywhere. And I thought, man, there's kind of this protester fatigue. Well, I went out into the streets today, started down on Wall Street, because of course you're going to do it on October 7th, because that's really the day you want to do it, right? You want to do it on a day that you should be having some commemoration and like really thinking about people that have lost their lives and been kidnapped. But no, you're not. And not one time in all of the protests that I've attended since October 7th, not one time have I heard the protesters who are by and large pro-Palestinian. You'll have like 600 pro-Palestinians. Sorry, I live in New York City here. And 6 guys from Israel, 6 like young dudes yelling at them and chanting. Not once have I heard about the massacre on October 7th in Israel and the kidnaps. Not once. Because if you allow that information in, it's going to really mess with your agenda here. So today we had, it was very loud. They have a couple of new things that they're doing. They laid out a flag that was probably about 80 feet long by the stock exchange, and they prayed at a certain point. They chanted, Israel kills, USA this, how many people did you kill today? About 75 times till everybody was in a trance. You had the usual people. You had the girl with the little squeezy piggy in the cop's face, kill yourself. And I got to tell you, I really love human beings, and I love to write these stories. But man, these people have got to get some new lines, because it has become they are so incurious and able to talk to you. They are just full of the same sloganeering And they're not really getting anywhere, except, of course, they moved uptown and they start hitting old men in the head. Because as a group, they're like all full of piss and vinegar. One-on-one, they might be interesting and nice. But I have to tell you, it was a bit enraging today. And I try not to get that way because it's my job to really report and bring it to you. But I've seen it for too long now. And I don't see where their mission here, where is it getting the cause? How is it bringing peace to the Middle East? I really think this has become masturbatory in a sense. It's so that they can feel something. But I don't think politically what they're doing is getting anybody anywhere.
Nancy, were there hundreds, thousands?
There
scores?
were, when I started out there, it was really weird because when I got there, there was like nobody but cops. So I have to say, the cops have really learned how to do this now. Like in Portland, it was a wreck. Now it's like, they got 600 officers in place. They kind of just chill until something happens. There were about 600 pro-Palestinian activists there. They know how to dress. They know what to say. They're not going to talk to you. I had to talk to the one person, the one spokesperson, blah, 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 the usual. I saw truly about 10 pro-Israel protesters, including one dude with a little tiny flag. And of course, they're just swarming him and screaming at him. I've got video cursing in his face, trying to cover him up. And I said to the guy who's wearing little glasses in the shape of hearts that's covering him up, I'm like, why don't you want to let him speak? Wouldn't even talk to me. They can't talk to you.
And were they literally hitting people in the head?
Well, they did uptown. Yeah, there's a video up now of a guy who was wearing I reported from Israel in January. I went to the hostage and family center and they have to like bring them home now sweatshirts. And he was wearing one and they were just hitting at him and some girl smacked him with a tambourine and he was bleeding and they were pushing him around. Yeah, because as a group, they've got all this like energy and they're so angry. But again, one-on-one, they're mostly kids. But you get them in a group, it can get pretty hairy. It's still going on because they were marching uptown. I think they were going to end at Columbus Circle. And of course, late night is when you get the yahoos. So
can we just pull back for a second and say, why are they doing this today? You know what happened today a year ago?
Yeah.
1,200 Jews and Thai workers were murdered. 250 were taken hostage and 3,500 people were injured as a result of an unwarranted and unprovoked invasion of Israeli territory. And a year later, the day is being hijacked by these people, many of whom are, I believe, paid agents of the Iranian regime. And I say that advisedly because we are told by Merrick Garland and the director of the FBI that there is direct Iranian contact between the protest movement in the United States and the Iranian regime. And the protest movement is bizarrely well-funded. For example, in the spring, suddenly every group on campus across the country had hundreds and hundreds of Coleman tents that cost $200.
Right.
In their hands in
it's
a day.
It's the same
everywhere.
Yeah.
50, 60.
And Coulter has a terrific column here. Why Kamala Harris's laugh is so annoying. Could someone teach Kamala to laugh only when something is funny? It's not the sound of Kamala Harris's laugh that is so irritating, although to be fair, it is. It's that she laughs when nothing remotely funny has been said. The blandest statements, usually her own, prompt her to explode into gales of laughter, doubling over, wide mouth, nose crinkled, her entire body shaking, often accompanied by hand clapping and foot stomping. Harris does it to punctuate a sentence. Can we hear it for Tim Walz? Hey, Nevada. Statements like, it's good to be back and isn't Tim Walz fantastic aren't bad jokes. They're not jokes at all. They're not even passingly amusing remarks. In January 2019, as Kamala Harris was entering her third year as a U.S. Senator, MSNBC's Jonathan Capehart asked her the most cliched question of all. Did she plan to run for president? A stupid and pointless question under any circumstances, especially when addressed to a woman of color in the Democratic Party. For the next 15 seconds, an eternity at a spoken event, Harris couldn't stop laughing energetically. I mean, what's hilarious about asking a U.S. Senator if she's planning on running for president? By forcing her audience to laugh with her, Harris makes them all like nitwits. It's a natural instinct to join someone laughing at his own joke out of politeness, but what if it's not funny? If you don't laugh, you're rude, but if you laugh, you're an idiot. You can see how a person of normal intelligence reacts to Harris's personal laugh track in the video of her monologue on wokeness at a 2017 conference where she was interviewed by Kara Swisher. And where's the video here? But you probably have seen it. Here we go.
And, we have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke.
Yeah, so Kamala Harris just laughs at the weirdest opportunities. There's just nothing remotely funny going on. That's why her laugh is so disturbing. And that's why it gets mocked. What if animals laugh by Kamala Harris?
The cackle of Kamala Harris is one of nature's most unique sounds, with no other creature in the animal kingdom that makes a noise quite like it. Have you ever wondered what it would sound like if other animals emitted such a laugh?
As Kamala Harris was nearly having convulsions at her own amazing wit, the other women on the stage, the New York Times' Kara Swisher and Apple founder's widow, Laurene Powell Jobs, sat immobile, gazing upon her with complete equanimity. At a 2022 press conference with a Polish president, a reporter asked if the U.S. was willing to take more Ukrainian refugees, whether the Polish president had requested that they do so.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
Tweet. What tweet? About saying that it is a modern day lynching. That.
Sorry.
Yes. Jussie Smollett.
So if it was legalized all throughout the country and medicinal, would you do it?
Listen, I think that it gives a lot of people joy, and we need more joy.
And is that a socialist or progressive perspective?
No. No.
Do you plan to visit the border?
Not today. But I have before, and I'm sure I will again.
You landed haymakers on Joe Biden. How do you go from being such a passionate opponent?
It was.
So when Kamala Harris was asked about taking in Ukrainian refugees after a long hesitation, she said, "A friend in need is a friend indeed." Then she was in stitches for a full 8 seconds. No one else in the room laughed. Video clips of Kamala Harris cracking up ought to be in online dictionaries next to the word fibber gibbet. Instead, the media has converted her inanity into the claim that she is joyful. You know who else is joyful? Dogs and children. Mickey Kaus says that there's an even more annoying and enduring Kamala Harris tick. It's the way she nods her head like a bouncing ball after making what she thinks should be considered an important or profound point. She's asking the audience to join in acknowledging its importance. Reject that and you are rude. What kind of politician persists in trying to pull off this trick? A politician who has a finger on the pulse of her audience, perhaps, but also a politician who has risen through the ranks, being given and expecting to be given a pass or a passing grade because, well, she's the first black woman this or first black Asian woman that. And you aren't going to scoff at or disrespect the first black Asian woman this or that, are you? She's invoking the distinct privilege, the slack you cut someone from a disadvantaged group. Mitt Romney couldn't get away with spouting empty, overwrought pieties, and he tried. Jeb Bush couldn't get away with it. He had to resort to please clap and was never seen again. Obama might have been able to get away with it, but he didn't need to. Kamala has. Kamala does. If I were a genuine pundit, I say this was a metaphor for the bareness of Kamala Harris's career and the hollowness of her campaign. All right, here's a brief bit from Dan Senor, and I think it's an illustration of the pragmatic nature of Judaism and Jewish law.
And so I thought, I just went to bed expecting that. I woke up the next morning, and then I started to see, when I woke up the next morning, which by that time was early afternoon Israel time, and I started on Saturday morning, I looked again, and then it looked much worse than I had thought. It felt like war. Again, but the wars I was used to, that I was accustomed to post-2014 were short wars. My wife woke up shortly after, and I said, Israel's a war. And again, I thought it was true that Israel was at war, but I had no sense for the scale of it. And I'm watching more and more news come out, and instinctively, I didn't intellectualize this, but two of my sisters and my mother all live in Israel, and my sister, who lives in Jerusalem, is very observant, modern Orthodox Jew. She and I, for as long as we've lived in separate homes, I don't think we've ever communicated on the phone on a Shabbat or on a Jewish holiday, ever. I mean, really, I was thinking about this after. I don't think we've ever, I just don't think to call her. She obviously wouldn't call me. And again, there's never been a reason for us to communicate on a telephone on a holiday or on a Shabbat. And I just called her. And it was Saturday morning, my time. It was early afternoon, her time. And she answered the phone. Now, when she answered the phone, that said everything. I knew that she answering the phone, there was something big happening, or she wouldn't answer the phone. And she proceeded to tell me what she knew what was going on. And she told me that she was at synagogue that morning. Keep in mind, it was Shabbat and it was Simchat Torah. And she told me that in the middle of the service, the sirens were going off, and those leading the service made the decision to end the service, which is just unheard of all places, especially in the Jewish state. They ended the service early, and they were all going to scatter to their safe rooms or bomb shelters. But before they did that, they decided to say a blessing, the blessing for the state of Israel and a blessing for the IDF soldiers, because they knew at that point something big was happening. Then they scattered, and she was running home. And she told me on her way home, she saw in Jerusalem, she lives in the Baca area, which is a pretty on the more religious end of the spectrum, not ultra-Orthodox by any stretch, but it's more religious. So when you're in the Baca neighborhood, you never see people. Much like I would never think to call my sister on the phone on a Saturday, you never see people in cars in Baca on a Saturday. And she said the image, as she was going back to her home, of men with yarmulkes driving their cars. And these were men who were reporting for reserve duty. They'd been called up. And that she said that was just so jarring. In all her years living in Jerusalem, she couldn't remember the last time she saw men with yarmulkes on a Saturday morning driving. So you add all that up, and this, I was 2 years old during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. I was a college student during the 1991 Gulf.
Right. So all Jewish laws, but 3 can be suspended when there's an emergency.
If he reaches out too quickly to.
So this is Dr. Warren Farrell, used to be a feminist and has now become something of a mentor for many men.
To a woman, he's a sexual harasser. If it's not quick enough, he's a wimp. Men are feeling like if DEI doesn't include him, all the things that I mentioned before, these all create anger in men, and nobody understands that anger is vulnerability's mask. And so the way anger is met is to be angry at people who are angry, as opposed to understand that they are vulnerable and to have empathy for the vulnerability beneath that anger, hidden by that anger. And so this, by not being expressed, is leaving so many men just with nobody seeing their vulnerability, angry. And the one person in the world who expresses anger really very well is President Trump, who is a potential leader. And so they're hearing his, he doesn't let anything stop him, and he's, and he's not caught up in DEI and feminism and creating councils for just women and girls and women. So he may not say much of anything about it, but he sure doesn't. He doesn't cater to women and to feminism in the same way that the Democratic Party is. So they're moving to the right because it's the only place that is expressing the anger in a way that they are identifying with, and also not sort of turning you into having to feel that the world is about women good, men bad. All the domestic violence, it happens from men to women, even though it's about 50-50, but no feminist will tell you that. And so a lot is not clear for the men, but they just know. It's almost more like, I can't stand that the Democratic Party is against me and all for women as much as it is for an admiration for Trump, although there is a certain amount of admiration for him because he is so absolutely certain, or appears to be absolutely certain about what he says. And
okay, tell me if I already played the segment.
Pass the basic test that people think she needs to pass. That's not a creation of me. It's not a creation of the media. It's not a creation of Republicans. It's out of the mouths of a lot of undecided voters you've heard from on this platform that show up in focus groups. And again, she continues to make a faithful choice as the clock ticks down to spend her time doing what will be lighter interviews where there will be some serious questions, but not the kind that are going to elicit what many people say they want to hear. 2, on the...
Okay, I think I did play that.
the furthest thing that Kamala Harris is capable of. She's doing the opposite. The next time I did an interview with the same person, he starts saying she's stupid. I didn't use the word stupid. She kind of is. But my point is, she tried to do the basement strategy. She tried to do the Joe Biden thing. Remember Joe Biden sitting in his basement in Wilmington, Delaware, never coming out, never giving a speech, etc. They tried to run that playbook. It wasn't working. The American people say, no, inflation is too high, too many wars, too many riots in 2020, too much going on, no job hiring. Say, we want to hear what you have to say. We're not buying into this basement strategy. We got fooled once, we're not getting fooled again. So then her handler said, all right, we better put her out on some interviews. They send her to all these really friendly venues, Howard Stern, 60 Minutes, The View, some podcast, Call Her Daddy, whatever. It's mostly about sex. But these are the friendliest interviews you're ever going to get, or she's ever going to get. And she blew it. She blew every single one. They use the phrase word salad. She says things, they're platitudes, they're cliches, they're repetitive. And you listen to her answer and you say, what did she say? Like, what was that? And you don't have the answer, and you realize it very quickly. That's what's happening. So to say, we can't do the basement strategy, we put her out there, and they did put her out there. But when they did, the entire American public could see that she was, as I say, a dunce. I mean, just not smart. And it's like
about Biden for years or whatever, but at some point in time, you started calling him like a senile husk. And I remember hearing that. I'm like, we need to search our archives and see when you started saying that.
A senile husk, that seems like a pretty accurate description of Joe Biden. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.